Safety Doc Podcast with author, radio host, and nationally recognized safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin. Join us each week as we discuss the best and most bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. Follow Dr. Perrodin on Twitter at SafetyPhD. And remember, the truth will keep you safe.
Hey guys, I'm sorry. It's been a while since I've used the interface, so here I am. Believe it or not, it's Doc. Yeah, and I have my monitoring screen over here. And anyway, there's a little bit of extra furniture in the back because they're doing some painting on a wall over here. But yeah, so it's crazy. So I haven't used the interface for a little while, but yeah, I'm still here. So I had all of my sport coats cleaned and my navy pea coat, my wool pea coat, back in May, and I had to drive an hour to the dry cleaner to do that. So because everything's gone around here, we don't have a dry cleaner in town anymore. Like the family one that was here for like 90 years, closed up. So yeah, this is the first time I've worn the sport coat since it's been cleaned. So it's looking good. Um, yeah. So let's go. I have a couple things to go over here, and then we're going to dig deep into this school stuff because this is probably happening by you, like within a stone's throw of where you live. Zippy and Swamp and Andrew and all you guys, like this is probably happening. So a few things. Yesterday I biked 70 miles, which is a good outing. It's not the most I've biked, but it's the most I've biked this year. I haven't topped 70 miles. And it's kind of a weird year because we had a cold spring and I just kind of never got usually by this time of year I've had more bike rides in. But anyway, there were a lot of blue heron on a backwater of the Wisconsin River. So it was really cool. And I would get off the bike, get out my camera, and like I'm a good 100 yards away from where they're at. And their hearing is so sensitive, right? Like if you just make a little bit of I brushed my foot against some gravel on the road and boom, they all left. They're gone. So I had to be like super slow with my movements and things, but I got some pretty cool pictures. And actually, let me see if I can bring one up. So I mean, that was really a treat to do that, to be out there and yeah. Let me share this on screen right now. Share screen. Yep, got it. So right there, let me move myself down. So that is, that's zoomed in, right? But that's a backwater of the Wisconsin River. In the back there is a levee, and yes, there's some heron. So really, really cool this time of year when you have that stuff going on. So, yeah. So I felt great on the ride, and I always say like a bike ride is a terrific diagnostic tool for your health because one, right, cardiovascular, and your pulse, right. The other one is balance, of course, cognition, like where am I, like can I you kind of map out where you're at and how to get back. And then I do these things where I'll take like a mile and I'll be like, okay, I'm going to bike like 18 miles an hour consistently, like for this mile. And then I'll stop and, just keep biking. And that's to kind of check for endurance, like, was able to do it, any issues and stuff like that. But yeah, it was great. It was absolutely great. So yeah, got the bike out, spent the day before getting it tuned up, and I've got it right. I mean, realistically, I've got 2 months of bike rides left, and then I have to store it away. But so really nice, though. Oh God, just great. So I've been building my fall classes. I teach university classes for the same university since 2003. So this is entering my 19th year, and I teach a superintendent legal issues course and then a special education law course. Both this fall. So that will occupy 6 weekends starting not too long. So, and I updated. So the university every year will send out a new syllabus template, and you have to take your existing syllabus and then merge it into this template. And what that involves is there's usually new policies or regulations, and they'll link out to other things, but that's becoming more it's taking more time. Like in the old days, there would just be minor tweaks on a syllabus, and now like you have to reformat and just change up all of these things quite a bit. It's not just a copy and paste. So, um, but I've been building those out. I think I have both of them done. I'll check them one more time, and then the classes are in person, but there's also an online component in what's called Moodle. Um, so I have that mostly built out. I just need to go and make sure everything works and the links work and stuff like that. But yeah, those are coming up. Looking forward to it. Today I was at our farmers market in town, and always enjoy being able to do that. Right? Hey, grab a big tomato and I had the best salsa I've ever had in my life. I bought today. No sugar salsa, and it was interesting because I asked the lady, I'm like, well, tell me a little bit about your salsa. And she's like, I boil this down for like 4 hours and all the stuff. And she had she had the label on it. And then they have like this family produce farm but she had her name, her address, and her phone number, like her cell phone number, like on this label. And again, it goes to like this. I think there's a website then, which is like a family, like a produce farm and stuff. But I'm like, that's commitment when you do that, like as a seller, right? Like you were standing behind your product. But it was terrific. It was awesome. So I will be back there next Thursday, partially because there's the knife guy now. I don't know if you remember back. I remember this, like back in the 70s. There'd be somebody would come through town, either like a pickup truck or a cart, and would sharpen knives. Like and I think it got changed to where you had to go to like a spot where this knife sharpening person. We had one in town here, not too long ago. I don't know, 5-10 years. Had a little sign outside of his house, like bring in your scissors and stuff like that. But yeah, so I'm like, a lot of stuff that could use sharpening that I use outdoors to trim and stuff like that. So I was like, yay. He's like, I'll be here next week. I'm like, boom, I'm bringing down a whole bunch of stuff for you, buddy. So yeah, that was cool. The farmer's market is kind of a weird vibe though, because you've got the produce and vegetable people, right? And then you've got the people who are selling candles and crocheted things and stuff like that, which to me really isn't a farmer's market. Like doesn't belong in a farmer's market. More of a craft sale. But I think that when that gets too conflated, these places just kind of lose their appeal, right? I don't know, but I found, today was about 80-20. It was 80% produce and it was 20%, like the craft thing. So, hey, a couple of weeks ago, I was out at our fire station, and we had we have a new fire engine in town, right? So they retired a 1986 pumper, and they bought a new pumper, or they ordered one. I think it took about a year and a half for it to get built. $583,000. So when they took delivery, they were told if you were to order this today, it'd be $710,000. So we have a new chief, and he wanted to start this tradition, which dates back to when you had the horses pulling the fire apparatus. And so it was to push the engine into the fire station, which is an incredible feat because the fire station the front slopes down from there. But anyway, the truck is 80,000 pounds. So you don't want to have that go wrong. You got to have some strong people. But it was funny because I went there, and they basically showed off the truck, right? It's a big thing. A lot of people turned out. It was like Monday night, and the chief pointed to a couple of people, and they were the elderly people. They're like, "Hey, come over here and help push the truck." And they're like, "No way! Like, we can't do that." Of course, they're just backing the truck in, right? But what something really fascinating. The chief's grandmother was there, in attendance, right? And she's 104 years old, the fire chief's grandmother. And she remembered, and she was telling the story about when they had horses pulling the fire apparatus, which happened in our city here until like 1927 or 28 was the last time. And you typically would keep the horses through winter because it was very hard to have any driven vehicles back like in the 20s in the cities. I mean, you didn't have the same snowplow type stuff that you have today in clearing, and it was just easier to with horses to get around the fire apparatus. So, but she remembers. So she's there in attendance, and there's brand new, 2,000 gallon per minute pumper and those high tech stuff. And she's talking about, the fire department was there, and then they would drop off. They would disconnect the horses, and then the people that lived around there would show up and help the firefighters like push the apparatus into the firehouse, right? And I'm like, this is amazing. I mean, this lady recalling this stuff. So anyway, I thought that was phenomenal. That I was glad I went anyway, but then to hear that, and from her perspective, I mean, it's got to be pretty amazing, right? To look at this thing and say, I remember when horses were pulling, a cart with ladders on it. So, yeah. So, and before we get rolling here into the heart of the story, I was able to remedy my garage floor pretty well. I had a bad batch of some cement and epoxy cement. I know epoxy isn't cement, but for that purpose, right, of filling in. I'd done it before and whatever, but I never set up. It was really a pain to remove, and I started to use acetone, and finally grind everything down. But I've got it pretty good now. Like everything's in the next spring, but like acetone. But you gotta be careful with acetone rags. Like when you get done using acetone, you can't just like throw that stuff in the garbage because it's such a low flash point. They can just start on fire if it's warm, right? Or if it starts to, it's kind of like a fire in a haymow, right? It's just the evaporation and stuff can cause heat. So I needed to put all the rags outside. I have this like 6-foot stone that goes all around my house, stones. So I would put it in the middle of the stones, these rags, and then put like a couple stones over them and just let them dry out. And then, it was just crazy though. It's like, so yeah, well, let's get into today's, show is we have these teacher bonuses. So there is this defined, teacher shortage. That's not new news, but you don't really hear about that in the media, right? You don't hear about it in the bills that get passed, and the Safer Communities bill, which had $1 billion heading into school mental health for mental health counselors and stuff. And you got to pause at that. At least I have to pause at that and say, oh, you got $1 billion you're putting over here for, youth mental health in schools. But at the same time, that school might be down 10 teachers for the year that they weren't able to hire. Like they're running short staffed. So at some point you have to ask the question, if you weren't short staffed, right? How do you square this, right? Like you should be focusing on your staff. You should make sure that you have enough teachers, but that's not the case, right? So the money's coming in toward mental health, and you might have a teacher who has a class of 40 elementary kids because there aren't enough teachers. They haven't hired. There's not people out there to have a class size of 20 or 15 or something. But so anyway, let's get right into this kind of big headline here. Des Moines Public Schools in Iowa is offering a $50,000 incentive to teachers, nurses, and administrators who are nearing retirement to stay with the district through the year 2022-2023, this upcoming school year. So if you are going to retire in Des Moines and you stick around for a year, they'll give you 50 grand as a teacher or administrator. That's a pretty good deal because it counts toward your state retirement system. And So it's a year you're not drawing off of that, and then it's 50,000 is whatever the district puts in, or the taxpayer really, and then the teachers. So this actually has more than a $50,000 bump. It has a bump also in your benefits because you have more money that's going in. But anyway, 50 grand. Not a lot of people interested in this. Nope, people not. So a few states over, in Michigan's Jackson Public Schools and state of Michigan, they're offering $10,000 sign-on bonus for new teachers. The catch is you have to stay 2 years. But if you're willing to stay 2 years in Jackson Public Schools, you will receive a $10,000 signing bonus. Wow. Like completely, I just want to pause here. This stuff is unheard of, just so you absolutely know. Bolo is saying, hey, after tax 25K. Yeah, I'm sure. Right. All of this is subject to tax. The part of this though, like the contribution that might go into like a state retirement or something like that, would be very beneficial for teachers, or like, but yeah, this is a very interesting thing. You're right. I mean, Bolo, it's almost like it would be better if they amortized it so you didn't get hit with a big bump on top of your salary, because it is going to maybe push you into a different tax bracket. But yeah, so this is from me, right? 25 years in education, teach this. Bonuses were pretty much the third rail. Nobody was ever giving bonuses in K-12 education. They were offering in some schools, hey, come here and teach. And if you teach here for 5 years, we'll pay off, $10,000 of your student debt, or something like that. That was kind of happening, but not on a wide scale. And nowhere, like 5 years ago, was there a posting for a teaching position K-12 with a bonus, right? Or nothing, maybe something negligible, right? Like $500, but nothing like $50,000, right? Nothing like that existed. And I had this as a case study, right? And when I first introduced it to my students, and they were kind of like, this will never happen. And I'm like, well, whether it happens or it doesn't, it's a good case study to talk about how you process through this, right? And yeah, it's happening. So let me talk, a little bit more about this. So Des Moines Public Schools offering $50,000 for 1 year. But over in the state of Georgia has been trying to recruit retired teachers. So if you have retired out of Georgia, they're contacting you and they're saying, hey, like, come back, right? And we will, give you a lucrative, bonus and additional state retirement, payments, stuff like that. So of 56,000 retirees, get this, in Georgia, who they contacted, right, out of 56,000 people who had just recently retired, so within maybe the last 5 years, less than 100 responded with an interest of doing this. So even though you're putting the money out there for people, the money is not changing their mind. So you look at an average teacher salary, not new, but average in Wisconsin. I looked today; it was 60,000. Some states it's 40,000. Some states it's 70,000. But let's just say, you have a chance to go and double your salary from 50,000 to 100,000, and even if it's short term, right? But even these people aren't doing it; they're not going back. Or someone of saying, "Oh yeah, like I'll jump back into, I'll teach a year or two, and take some extra payments into my state retirement, which will boost when I actually do officially retire for good. Like I'll get higher payments, and I'll just have more money. Right now, the economy is real iffy, right? Like it seems like a time when people would be compelled to jump at this. That's the thing, right? Like, shortages going to stores, and this might not be here, and gas has gone up, and utilities, and just everything else, that if you have this opportunity, you jump at it, but people aren't jumping at it. So the message there is, you're not going to be able to buy teachers back into the profession or to sign on to the profession. And this to me is what really irks me on this too is I remember as a school administrator, No Child Left Behind and all of that stuff where they were saying, oh, like highly qualified educators and stuff like this. So they would make teachers, in our state did it too. I got something flying around here, whatever it is, but they would make teachers, when I was an administrator, you had to do personal improvement or professional plans or whatever they call them. And then you had to have a committee, which included a peer teacher, an administrator, and someone from a university. And you had to meet and go over your plan and how you'd meet these goals and whatever. And it was just garbage. Like, it was such wasted time doing that. Absolute waste of time. All these pseudo certifications. You already have to be licensed to be a teacher, right? It's typically a 4-year degree, but we're going to talk about how that is changing. But all of these No Child Left Behind add-ons, so like these highly qualified teachers, and really going back, like that caused a lot of this. When you started to add in all of this layering into the credentials, 5-10 years ago, people were looking at careers and saying, well, I don't want to get into that if when I get out, I've got to do all this professional development, like ongoing, and that like my class, their test scores gets linked to me forever. And that was happening in some states, right? They could evaluate you and give you your pay scale based upon how your students are doing. Well, that's kind of a roll of the dice in some of these cases. Or, what if, again, or you get assigned and your principal is weak, right? And there's a lot of things that aren't being attended to, like the schedule's not very well kept, or discipline, or whatever. I mean, there's things out of your control, so many things. So I think that the professions set themselves up for this, because again, you can look at this and say, there are, through the examples I gave and other ones where, you could have between $80,000 and $100,000 for teachers, plus very generous health insurance in a lot of districts, plus state pensions in most districts. So if you're making, let's say, for example, a $50,000, the district might be putting in $3,000 or $4,000 a year into the state pension on your behalf, and then you'd be putting in the same. So it's like a 1-to-1 matching to like 7 or 8%. And then that stays there. And then at 55 or older, you can start taking withdrawals, and you can usually get like 180 payments, or for life, like if you, and that's a pretty sweet gig, right? So anyway, these this teacher shortage, these bonuses, but the bonuses aren't working. So right there is, and I'd said this in a previous podcast, and I always share it with my, school administrators in the classes. I said, you can't, even if you're offering $100,000 to a teacher, it just doesn't, you're not going to bring people in anymore. I mean, I just read an article yesterday. Pharmacists now are being recruited at $75,000 sign-on bonuses. And we can just go down the line of sign-on bonuses for different professions. Like, this is out there. So people are going to be very picky on what they're going to do. And a part of what really hurts education is No Child Left Behind, the remnants of No Child Left Behind, and this progressive credentialism. You have to get a initial teaching degree with a bachelor's, then you're expected to go back and get, like a master's degree, maybe like a reading license, and then so much continuing education and autism certificate and all of these things, English as a second language certificate. People are like, no. Now, granted, I'm not anti-professional development. That needs to happen in all professions, right? But it is so, and it's so much poured into the education model, and it's so much tied to whether you move on a salary scale or not. So it's really over the top. So if you move out of education to other professions or come in, like, it's different. I worked in the private sector in medical before I came over to education, and we didn't have anything close to this for professional development. Not that it was insufficient, but I mean, this, these massive, intense, plans and So anyway, I think that was the thing. So Vanessa's asking how much money is enough, and I'm going to get into that. And let me skip ahead, and I'll come back in a little bit and address this in more detail. You can. There's a study, the happiness study, the World Happiness Study. I've got it in the post. It's something actually, it's very well done. It's a team of researchers, been doing it for a number of years. So you find something, hey, it's a World Happiness Study. It's probably hokey, but it's not. And it's asking, over time, people in different countries and whatever, what would be more valuable to you? And one of the questions, they compare different things, but one of the questions, I almost wrote about this in Velocity of Information, although it wasn't pertinent in the final draft. But if you could receive double your salary, right? Or you knew that the place you lived, if you lost your wallet, that someone would find it. If someone found it, they would return it to you. Like, which one of these is more valuable to you? You can take A or B, like, double your salary or return your wallet. Most people took return your wallet. Wasn't even close. I think it was like 3-1. And, this was across countries. This is across time, like last year before this year, whatever. And the thing is, right, people want to be in a community where they're supported, where they think people have their back and stuff like that. And, money isn't, no one is going to jump at money if they live in a dangerous neighborhood, right? And their life is at risk, or they're entering a career that they feel is just going to burn them out, right? So yeah, that's an interesting point. So I'll come back to that, but thanks for bringing that up, Vanessa. So teacher shortages. In 2019, the Economic Policy Institute released a report. So this, we've known this for years, right? Because you can figure out who's going. Teaching is one of those things that's easier to predict because you have to have a license in most places to teach. So, the students who are enrolling in these things and who's applying for licenses. So, so let's think about this. So, in 2019, the Economic Policy Institute had a report, and they said, at that time, teacher shortage, they were looking at 2017 and 2018, that they estimated the U.S. was short 110,000 teachers. So 2017, 2018. Then they projected all the way out to 2025. And they said, at 2025, like, it just continues to grow. Like, we'll be short 200,000 teachers across the U.S. So almost double. And basically, so the people available to go into the classrooms outstrips there's more demand than there's people to go into classrooms, right? So that's going on. So this isn't anything that wasn't predicted. And you can, see this at least 4 years into the future by looking at, university programs and things like that. So, I guess my point with that is I don't feel, it's not like anybody can come and say, oh my God, next to us, the county next to us, our county seat, which is very wealthy. It's a growing area, one of the fastest growing in the country. And they had 600 teaching positions open in that county as of 2 weeks ago, right? Which was unheard of because they pay, very well, and a very solid benefit package and a lot of amenities in that area. And this was unheard of. This was never happening. But yeah, they were unable to fill a lot of these positions and have to get the year rolling without positions filled. So, but I look at this and say, well, if you knew this was coming down the pipe, like, where was this in our Safer Communities Act or just in any legislation, right, to either address this, or if there's statewide legislation to address this with different state credits? I don't know, but it's not like this just snuck up on you, right? This didn't ambush you. You can't pretend, I guess, that suddenly this happened. So yeah. Now, what also I think people were counting on was that the the job market would stay tight, that people would be going for the benefits here in teaching, and of course for the retirement. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing from a benefits perspective is if you enter a district and teach for 25 or 30 years, a public school district, you have a pension which will last. You'll have a monthly check for as long as you live, right? And combine that with Social Security and hopefully some other savings or a side gig, and you'll probably be in pretty good shape. So again, I know this from being in the system. So yeah, but let me go over and hit the chat here. So thank you so much. So let me catch up a little bit. RJ is saying you can learn coding, making some money, and not deal with the wokeness and the students. So that's part of it, RJ, right? Is there are so many things out there that people could do right now that they can pick from and that will pay them well. And this is where we see, even in my area, retail and fast food at $20 to $25 an hour, and people are like, whoa. So it is a big difference. Vanessa saying, bonus on what? My pay scale is maxed out at every public school, and those charters must have higher. So schools won't typically post their scales right now. Of course, they won't do that because they don't want people to leverage that against them, right? And that's never really been public because they'll say, oh, it's on an individual basis when we look at your experience coming in. And then there's also some things, if you're a high shortage area, if you're a chemistry teacher, if you're a speech language pathologist, they can adjust and give you more pay. So, but yeah, there are in my area, there are teachers who are well close to six figures, right? And I mean, if you're in Des Moines and they're offering 50,000 in, so you don't retire, I don't know what their top of the scale is exactly, but I mean, you're probably already at 70 or 80. I mean, if you're just into teaching plus now that 50,000, which I think would have to come out as like a stipend or something. I don't know. I've read the articles, they're linked out and stuff like that, but so let's so Vanessa's saying, pay me 80 grand a school year and then add 50K just to give me to get me to switch locations. So that's another thing, Vanessa. It's a really good point. And one I wanted to underscore is if you think that, a $50,000 bonus, that is, again, it's very short-sighted because people aren't going to move to largely an inner city or a rural area and set up, buy a home, especially now, right? The home prices of homes and taking out a mortgage and taking that risk versus thinking, where do I really want to be? Like, where do I see a place that I really want to live? Or, they might come into these areas and maybe live in a rental property for a year or two, get the experience, take the money, and then move on. So another part of, as you've indicated, Vanessa, is you've got to lure people into your areas. And that's one thing when I talk about, I live next to our state capitol, and they're kind of puzzled, like, right, we're offering all of this money. And, there's this is a really robust area, and there's a lot for people. And I'm like, yeah, but you also have an entry level home at $800,000. I mean, who's going to go for that, right? And it's this barrier to entry, right? I mean, you can't do that. So maybe you'll have someone who will say, yeah, I'll take it. Like, I'll drive in, and they're going to pay the price of gas and winters here in Wisconsin. And maybe, they'll live 30 miles away and, somewhere where it's more affordable, but still, like, it's this trade-off. Like, where do you go for the money? I mean, if you're going to do that, there's other things you could do. I mean, for teaching professions and private schools or teach overseas. I mean, if you're just out there to kind of build up some money at the start so you can get a payment on a house and things like that to get your life started. So RJ is saying, thanks for RJ. I haven't seen you in here before, so thanks for posting. All of this could be resolved by bringing back families, God, and enforcement laws. Yeah. So RJ is looking at this and saying, there's a lot of root cause stuff. If we really drill down in this, that would probably help to solve this and a lot of things, right? So yeah, and that's the point. You're right on. Teachers have failed America. But I mean, I know people have that perspective. I work with some amazing aspiring administrators, and I think teaching, RJ, and I think teaching it has become, if we think of a huge ship, right? Think of a football field long ship that is, like 120 years old. And when it was first built, it was pretty amazing, and then it got retrofitted and updated. But it's now has entropy, right? There's too many things are added on to it. There's all these barnacles that are on. It's not, you can't maneuver it anymore, and it just doesn't make sense to you can't. I don't think you can just fix teaching. You have to just kind of adopt a new model. I mean, we're moving into meta. We're moving into, does it make sense to build a school, population, a dense environment where you're going to have kids there 5 days a week? This whole thing, of having to go K through 12, does that make sense? Or should you be able, at 13, 14, 15 years old to get into, whatever you want and start making money? Name, image, likeness, right? For years in the college ranks, in college athletics, remember, the athletes never got paid a dime, and now they get name and image likeness. Not saying that should happen in schools, but I'm saying there's these long held ways that we do things, and suddenly they kind of tumble down. So I think this whole thing of kids staying till they're 18 in a school is going to go by the wayside. We've already seen sports kind of flex, and I don't. What I'm saying by that is sports in schools, have, now we have esports, we have things that are changing. So some people go to school and you want 4 years of high school sports experience, and that's not as big of a draw anymore. But I think we're in this time where this whole K-16 thing, or K-16 meaning post-secondary, but K-12 is going to change. And, one of the things, and I was talking to a friend of mine who, Chad Elkins CPA, and Chad recently had on his show a cam girl who he does her taxes. And Chad and I had talked about this during the pandemic. I asked him, what is happening right now with that you see where people are doing better financially in the pandemic and doing worse, right? And one thing he said is, if you can work one remotely, like as a therapist or something, you're doing better. But he also said people who are in the cam profession, like cam girls, I'm not saying that to be demeaning, I'm saying it to be objective, are making huge amounts of money. So there's also this part of between that and video gaming, and I'm being, I want to be a TikToker. I want to have a show and about, camping and things like that. I'm not saying these are great professions, but I know people who do this full time. I know 3 people that is their full-time living, and they do very well at it. And one of my friends was a teacher, and he does outdoor shows where he hikes. And he has now been doing that for 4 or 5 years. He has Patreon people backing him, and he left teaching and does this full time. And I think he doesn't say exactly what he makes, but it is at least 3 times what he had made while he was teaching. And it is all G-rated stuff and stuff he wants to do, right? So he's getting advertisement off, and who would have thought this would have been a thing? And so this whole thing too with teaching, imagine, so I was talking to a university counselor, and I said, what's one of the hardest things right now for a university to get students back. And because I thought, is it the trust? Is it that a student, if they come in, they're like, I'm here, but I want to be here for the in-person experience. I don't want the school to go virtual and send me home, which happened to our friend Nick Schuleiner, who was on the show. If there's a pandemic, something like that, I want the experience. I said, well, is that it? And they're like, yeah, not really. And I'm like, what is it? It's like, people are weighing whether they should, do their YouTube, their TikTok, their video, whatever stuff, do that now and make money and then maybe go to school later, right? And when you put the numbers up against each other, for a lot of people, it makes sense to try that now. Or esports, which is in colleges. The college I teach at now has an esports team. They built out this esports competitive area where there's like seats and big screens. And I mean, these things are happening now. So some of these could be name and image likeness. And so let's go back to like teacher shortages. What does this all mean is you're having fewer people, go into teaching, which we know, but you have a lot of competition. So that person could either choose, I'm going to go at it at my own, is try to be a social influencer, right? Or YouTube influencer, which is pretty high scale to like get that to work. But if you're doing that at 18, 19, 17, 18, 19, 20, and it doesn't work, there's not a lot lost, right? You don't have a lot of sunk cost into that. Versus like if I'm paying to go to college for $20,000 or $30,000 a year, versus if I'm working somewhere, part-time and trying to get my YouTube thing. So, and you're probably learning a lot of marketing and technical skills that will apply to things that you'll do later on. So, let me go back here to the chat. So we have a good friend, All Pro Lemonton, who's a bicyclist. So I appreciate that, buddy. I always love seeing the image of the bike. When I was out this week, I was out yesterday. There's a honeysuckle field, and I didn't know if it was plowed under or anything because it hadn't kind of bloomed until like yesterday. And the smell of honeysuckle, there's nothing like it when you're out biking. Like I maybe it takes me 5 minutes to go through that, and it is I just wish I could like capture that and like bring a little bit of that out in January when it's minus 30 here and howling winds and snow. And but I recognize it. Like I'm so in tune when I go through there, just how special it is. Alpro Lemonton is saying, I'm not a teacher, but I thought about getting a master's so I can adjunct community college. Yeah, so let's go there. And that award in the back, I was the adjunct professor of the year at the university I teach at for the last 19 years. As an adjunct, I've taught at different universities as an adjunct. So an adjunct is basically a part-time faculty member. Even though I have a PhD, I'm not there to teach a full load. Although as an adjunct, a few times I had like a full load, which I think was 4 courses a semester. But adjunct teaching, and I should do a show just on this because I've taught for several universities and I've taught like maybe 150 courses over the years, like most of them I built, but everything from statistics to, the law classes, which I teach now. But I love teaching at the university level and I love being an adjunct. I would love doing that full time, but I don't really, if that's not what I want to do. I don't want to teach full time right now at the university, but I love being an adjunct. And one thing, All Pro Lemonton, in maybe 150 classes that I instructed, I never had a class where I got done and I'm like, God, I'm glad that's done. I never felt that way ever about a class, ever. And as far as college students and situations that might have get sticky, like a student's not attending and they want extensions and stuff like that. That happens so rarely that those are just kind of one-off things. And the university has a big network to support you, right? Because they don't want that student to drop out. Because then it impacts financial aid and other things. So like they have a team, all these people that get involved. But I'll tell you, I love it. I absolutely love it. I think you're held in a position of high respect. You can customize things out. I think you can show your humor. I'm always learning. I'm learning from the people that I'm interacting with. So I think it's worth it for you. And and I would say check with your community college, and you can do some of this online. I teach 2/3 in person, 1/3 online, and there's opportunities out there. And actually, we have a technical college in our town, and I've never approached them to say, because they have some requisite courses of, hey, like, I could come in and teach some of this stuff for you, but I only live a few blocks away. So I'll tell you, buddy, anybody listening, if you have the opportunity to take a path and become an adjunct professor, I would do it. 100% down. I would endorse it. As far as pay, for a semester, you're going, depending on what kind of college you get into. Now, there's no benefits in adjunct teaching. Usually about between 3,000 and maybe like 4,500 per class, and they will limit you to the number of classes you can teach, like at one university, like maybe to 4, because otherwise then they would have to like move you up to full time or something. But I'll tell you, I definitely think as something to do as on the side that's very professional and builds your skill set. And in addition to that, it's something you can do over time. New classes get introduced. You can inquire if you'd be able to teach some of those. So anyway, I'll focus on that just in one podcast, because it's been such a positive experience for me, and the people I've gotten to know, right? The stuff that I get to develop. I feel like I really get to be myself when I'm teaching at the university level. And since this is School of Errors, Rethinking School Safety in America, here's a paperback. This is required in one of my classes. It's $20. So I'm not out there. There's some universities out there. I remember like buying books when I was a grad student stuff, like $300 book by the, instructor. And this was back before inflation. No, $20, right here. And this book is also in the pin tweet as an audiobook. I narrated it, came out August 1st, and you can get it on Downpour for $7.99. You can go on Audible and get it. I think they price like $20. I don't control what Audible, but you can get it for $7.99 as the pin tweet where I narrated this book. So yeah, this is one of my text books. So I took it and went through and how we would use it in class and how it matches standards. And so it's also pretty cool. Like when your students say, oh my God, like our instructor wrote the book. Here's Velocity of Information. This is not a textbook, but this book is in libraries all over the world. Velocity of Information, released in April, also in paperback ebook. This will be out in audiobook April 12th, 2023. Kind of a weird day, right? By contract, the audiobook had to come out 1 year after the print version of the book. This is in Squamish, British Columbia, in their library, along with School of Errors. But if you haven't, Velocity of Information is basically, here's the year 2020, everything that went down, and it was written within 2020. So it's really strong in semantics, word meaning. What did essential mean? What did non-essential mean? And wet ball, burnout. And I interviewed 10 people. Larry Lawton, America's biggest jewel thief. Nikolai Razavayu, who biked in Kyiv a day after Chernobyl. Linda Stone, a former IBM executive who worked on attention and attention theory. So just an awesome book, Velocity of Information and School of Errors. Both. If you're a parent or a parent or a teacher, right, School of Errors is definitely an important read to understand how schools approach school safety, because it is all over the place. And the biggest thing we should be doing right now for school safety is discretion. Who has discretion to make decisions? Who has discretion to activate the intruder alarm or the fire alarm, or to use the AED, or to use the fire extinguisher, right? So it's pretty crazy. You can go through, and I do this with my administrators. We do this as an activity. And I said, I want you to do this. I want you to, at your next staff meeting, we have like 2 weeks between classes. I want you to give Post-it notes to the teachers. And I want you to say, or have a principal do it. And I need a photo of this. I want you to bring in a photo so we can bring it up on screen. And to have people say, okay, when the meeting is done and you're going back to your classroom, I want you to put this Post-it note on the AED or the fire extinguisher that is closest to your room, right? I want you to do that. And people can teach in the same place for 10 years and they'll be like, I have no idea where these things are until they like are walking up and down the hallway. Oh, like there's the fire extinguisher or there's the AED. So it's this awareness of your assets. So I have them do that. And then I say, take a picture of it and, email it to me. And we're going to compile these. And then I'm going to have you, tell me about this process during class, but it's a discretion. So we don't do stuff like that. We don't teach discretion. And also discretion isn't just teachers. It's like, if I'm a high school student and somebody's on campus who's threatening, right? Do I have the ability to run a lockdown? Can I get that process started? Or do I have to weave through and find a teacher or an adult or something? So, who has the discretion to pull a fire alarm? We don't ask those questions, right? That's where School of Errors gets in and asks those questions. Like, you got to figure these things out. So, by the way, the velocity of information is up for a major award. Yeah, and that I'm saying actually in a humble tone. It is up for a major award. It's being considered for the S.I. Hayakawa Book Prize from the Institute of General Semantics. Semantics is word meaning, also what's called time binding. Time binding is having to do with words that describe a particular moment in time. So, like essential and non-essential, if people think of those terms, they're going to think of the pandemic, right? That moment in time, that's time binding, that language. Safe at home, they're going to think of the pandemic. So I did a lot of time binding in this book, and so it has been nominated by multiple people, and the award will be decided in December, and then the award will be given in New York City in October, along with a $1,000 cash prize. But it's a very coveted award. People say, what? The S.I. Hayakawa. But, in looking it up, you can see some of the previous, winners of the prize. It's pretty amazing. So anyway, I'm hopeful that the velocity of information receives that. We'll see what happens. So let's go. What areas are affected the most for teacher shortage? Well, it's probably pretty obvious, right? If you're in a rural school or a high poverty school, and both those can be the same, but rural schools, it's hard because one, if it's two people, both of them are trying to find something to do there, right? And now I guess you could do remote work, so maybe that opens things up a little bit, but still, rural areas for younger people especially don't hold the appeal of options, right? Of sports teams and movie theaters and malls and stuff like that. Although I guess some of that is kind of changing as more of that goes online. But rural areas, just again, it's always been harder to recruit. People that go to rural areas typically already have that mindset. If they want to go there, they're okay if the power goes out, for 24 hours and they have to run their generator, right? They're okay if they run out of milk and they have to drive 7 miles to the next store to get it. They're taking that trade-off, knowing that when they're out, there's maybe 2-3 other people on the streets. They're not having to sit and wait 30 minutes to go 7 miles in a city to work. So that's obvious. So these locations also have high turnover, right? So teachers will start out. So these rural districts, let's think about this as teacher bonus. So you're a small district, rural district, and you're like, we're going to give a $30,000 bonus if you stay here 2 years. And people come in and they stay and then they leave. So then you're stuck with having to pay new people to come in, right? Another bonus. Like, you're only going to rent them for so long. They're not going to set up there necessarily. So that's part of this, right? And so per universities.com, teacher shortages are reported across the U.S. Yeah. Nevada students started school on August 8th. 10 days ago, with a shortage of over 1,400 teachers. Nevada in the state, 1,400 teachers down to start the year. Ouch, man, that is, that is crazy to do that. Um, so the 5 states, the top 5 states for teacher shortages: California, which could be pretty predictable, right? Nevada, Washington, Arizona, and Hawaii. But then if you go down like North Dakota, South Dakota, so rural, and it just kind of moves all over. But yeah, so big teacher shortage. And again, the Safer Communities Bill, which was passed into law just in the last couple of weeks here, has $1 billion for school for mental health and mental health providers. But at the same time, has $0 for teachers. So wouldn't you make an argument of saying, our school has been running short on teachers. We've had class sizes of 40 students. We have one school counselor split across 3 buildings. We have one nurse per 1,000 kids in the district. Like, if we had these positions bolstered, then student mental health would improve because student needs would be being met. One of the things that there's, these studies, if you have someone who meets with you, right? When I interviewed Dr. David Mays for the Velocity of Information, there's a chapter in there. And one of the things he talked about is, it's hard to look at the impact of mental health therapy from the perspective of if you have a control group where you have a therapist meeting with somebody, right, and it's setting goals and whatever, maybe this person is anxious or depressed, and you have another group where somebody is just meeting with them, but they're not a therapist or whatever, and they're not meeting to do any therapy, they're just like talking with them. What's your day? What do you got going on for the future? Just like to be there, a friend basically, right? But there's no therapy going on in this other group. There's just someone to be with them. Like, both groups make gains. Like, having somebody show an interest in you makes you feel more positive about yourself, and these rating scales and stuff, but that's just having somebody showing interest in them. So the therapy side, there's gains, maybe there's more gains, but both sides make gains, right? So part of this is I think it's the elephant in the room, right? Like, you're saying, oh, we're putting $1 billion into mental health providers, and at the same time, our shortage of teachers is crazy. So it's like, how do you improve mental health when the rest of the school staffing is chaotic? So I don't think it makes sense, but it's what people want to hear, right? Especially after Uvalde. People want to hear, hey, we're putting more mental health into schools, because somehow they've associated mental health with school safety. And I don't think you can neatly draw that line. So other strategies to boost the appeal of teaching. So in some schools in the US, this is pretty big in the UK right now, but some schools in the US are trimming the work week to 4 days. Happened to a district near me. They're saying, yeah. So teachers, right? So if you're a teacher, like, there's some appeal in this of saying, or that, that you'll have a 4-day work week. There's some questions with this though. Like, in the pandemic, you could do it because the Department of Ed and your state departments of ed were saying, the student minutes that you're supposed to meet, we're going to relax those. Like, you have to have so many minutes of education students receive. And like, some schools, remember back in April of 2020, they just shut down for good. They're like, we're done. We can't do the remote thing and whatever, we're done. We'll see where things are at in fall. And those minutes never got made up. And it's called compensatory education. It's not part of the law. It's not part of education law. It's not part of special ed law. And it's really weakly defined through case study or case law. So I talked about that. I have an article that's coming out on that. And then I talked to my students in my classes about that. Of how are you making up like the time that kids lost? They're like, we're not really doing it. And no one's really holding them to it, right? I was researching that this week of saying, what are the consequences for all this missed time for kids or shortened days? And there really isn't any. There aren't lawsuits coming out either. That's amazing. I thought there'd be a lot of lawsuits about lost instructional time for students, and it's not happening. Twofold. One is parents just aren't bringing them up because they're like, well, what am I going to do? Like, my kid's in school full time now. So if I want like education to be made up, then what? They're going to stay there till 7 at night. I mean, or go to school on weekends. Like, there's some logistics in here that just don't make sense. So that's part of it, of saying, why these kids aren't going to, why they're not doing this. The other part is that lawyers aren't dealing with this. I mean, it's a shortage. Court system's really slow right now. So lawyers are like, do you really want to, fight this battle and pay this cost? So you don't see advocacy groups and lawyers taking this on. So because of that, because of shortening the school week during COVID, during the pandemic, and then when the pandemic was over, I guess, which I would say largely last year was normal face-to-face for a lot of schools, there wasn't this big push to make up these minutes, this lost time. So now you can see schools are like, okay, like, let's do the shortened week. So you do have an obligation in your state laws for a certain number of minutes that kids receive, which comes out to like 5 days a week, especially for students with disabilities. The Individuals with Disability Education Act, right? If you have an IEP and your student is supposed to receive 60 minutes of speech therapy per week, but now if the school's only in session 4 days a week and the speech therapist isn't there, they don't have school on Wednesday or Friday or whatever, and they're saying, oh, we're going to provide 40 minutes instead of 60. That's a big thing in federal law, but it's also, there aren't any teeth to that right now. These cases aren't coming up. I scoured for my fall special ed law class, and what I did find is people like me asking, like, why isn't this a bigger deal? But the cases aren't there. So what's happening is schools are trying to recruit people by saying, hey, we'll do 4 days, shortened schedule. We're going to cut down the school year. Instead of 180 contact days with students, 155, 160. How's that sound? Texas rural schools are implementing a 4-day work week to alleviate the teacher shortage. So Houston, Texas currently has 2,200 teaching vacancies. That was as of a couple days ago for their start of school, 2,200 teaching vacancies. So they pull, people from the administrative ranks into schools to fill some of that combined classes and things. But that's the thing, right? You have all this money coming in for mental health providers while you don't have these teaching positions filled. So, and if you're a mental health provider, I mean, you're not having to do all of this professional development and all of these other, if I'm a mental health provider at a school, I'm not having to go out and monitor the lunchroom. That's not assigned as a duty. I'm not going out and having playground duty and stuff like that. So, so those positions have some different appeal that traditional teaching doesn't. Florida is doing something innovative in recruiting military veterans to teach without a license. So there's two things that happen when there's a shortage, right? You increase pay to get people in, or you relax the standards to get people in, right? One of those two. Now, both of those can happen at the same time, which is really weird because, again, 15 years ago, when you were coming in to be a teacher, you were supposed to be this master level teacher. I mean, they had all of these things like from the Fed and, the state, and all these, you had to have a portfolio. And God, when I was teaching, I had to rank all my students or work for their portfolio, which it would turn into the state, which no one would look at anyway. But what you have now is you have an increase in pay and a decrease in barrier to entry. I'm not saying that these people can't be effective teachers. I'm not saying that at all. But let's be clear about what's happening here is if, we go back 10 years, you had to have this license as a teacher. Every 5 years, you had to, get it recertified, and you might have to take 3-4 courses, graduate courses, and to show that you're professional, all it, and that's all out the window. So the teachers in Polk County also hired 60 international teachers, and we're seeing that more around here too, of international teachers being brought in. I don't know how that works long term. Like, I don't know how the housing works for that. If the district is working with the community to do that, I don't know. I don't, again, doesn't seem like a long-term solution, but some schools are paying relocation expenses. So I'm going to talk about the free agency in school, in education. So who would have thought those would go together? But first, let's go back to the chat. Andrew is saying teachers aren't failing. The system is working perfectly as designed. And Vanessa saying, anyone here a teacher? So Zippy is saying, the school system is a joke. The teachers are just like cops and army. They're doing what they can with the chaos they're in. And Zippy, I'll say the chaos is real, right? When the discipline in schools in 2014, the Obama administration and the Department of Education sent out a letter to schools. I was an administrator at this time. They sent out a letter to schools, a dear colleague letter, 2014, saying, you're suspending too many students. And because student suspensions get reported to the state and to the Fed, Office of Civil Rights, right? You need to find other ways to address discipline. So what they were really saying is, we're not going to tell you how to do this. You just need to lower your suspension numbers. And schools did it. Like suspension numbers dropped in some places 50% or more. But schools aren't the discipline incidents are still happening, right? The school violence is still there. The out of controlness is still very much there. I wrote an article called, it's abeyance agreements, ABEYANC, abeyance agreements. It'll be in Phi Delta Kappan before the end of the year. It's like an 8,000 word article. It's like the big feature centerpiece. And I wrote it this summer, basically, of saying, when in 2014, right, this whole thing too with education, discipline in schools basically ended after that dear colleague letter went out in 2014. It basically ended. Because if schools suspend students, one, they get a lot of kickback from parents and advocacy groups who just jump into this. And the other is the state will say, hey, you've suspended too many students, right? And you can have consequences, professional improvement plan for your district, your state report card. This can be noted as parents shop for districts in open enrollment. They look and say, oh, like this district has whatever suspension rate and this district has this. Now, what's going on behind the doors in those districts could be identical. One district is not reporting suspensions. They're using what's called abeyance agreements, if they're using anything at all, but probably abeyance agreements. An abeyance agreement is not part of education law. I have a show I did on it on safetyphd.com here, so you can go back and type in abeyance agreement. Let me just type it. So you're like, abeyance, how do you... I didn't even know what this was, but you also hear this called like a pre-expulsion. And if you go to Tucson area school district, Tucson school district, they have a really detailed, here's what our abeyance agreement is. It's part of the law which shouldn't even exist because it's basically illegal. It's taking away your right for due process as a student. But so basically, let's say a kid vandalizes a school or threatens someone, and the school says, okay, instead of a consequence, right, of a suspension or a change of placement for that student or whatever, which is reportable, we have a plan. Your parent is 1 page long. Your child will follow the rules for the next 90 days. And if they do, we'll just forget this event, right? It'll be gone. And it does. It vanishes as a record. It's not out there. You can do an open records request. An attorney from a university who's working on a legal piece on this, legal brief on this. So legal brief is basically like analyzing part of the law, independently of saying, here's like a flaw in the laws, and it can be considered down the road, but you're not like looking at one case or something. But they're requesting abeyance agreements. How many students broke discipline rules in schools and basically have these suspensions that never showed up anywhere? And the schools won't report the data because they're like, well, it doesn't technically exist. It vanished like 90 days after the student was beyond that point. So teachers know this though, right? So if you're into teaching, you've done your student teaching or you're a couple of years into teaching, what the discipline, is not good. And if you've been in teaching since prior to 2014, you know that discipline following the Dear Colleague Letter 2014 substantially fell off a cliff in schools. And again, schools, it becomes a huge negative for schools to what I would say authentically discipline. But whoa, let's go. Vanessa saying, do what is required to get there. Well, I gotta catch up here. Sorry about that. So, Vanessa saying, my car is old, but I replace items in it often. Most anything mechanical, etc., needs attention. So, what Vanessa is addressing there, right, is entropy of systems, right? All systems tend to fall apart over time. When I talk to Robert Travis in my book, Philosophy of Information, the crab boat guy, right? And he talked about, the boat would always accumulate ice. So every, 16 hours or whatever, you had to go out with sledgehammers and baseball bats and pound the ice off of the boat, because otherwise it could lose buoyancy. And a ship, a crab boat sank that way like 3-4 years ago. Just got too heavy and a wave came and just took it down, like too much ice on it. All these systems entropy, talk about the fire department, right? The new truck replaced a truck from 1986 where the thing was just falling apart. You're moving a multi-ton piece of equipment around for years and years, and things just work loose and things start to rust out and all these other stuff. Switches go bad and entropy of systems. So we have that in schools. And when you have this constant turnover of people coming in and out, it's hard to address entropy too, because people aren't there long enough to kind of make these systems change. Administrators stay about 2 years, 2 to 3 years for a superintendent or a principal, and then they move on. So wrote about that in School Affairs. So what if we had free agency widespread across public schools? Basically, teachers were free agents, which I think has happened. I don't think everybody realizes this has happened yet, but I think it's happened. Right now, if you are a teacher, you're a tech ed teacher, chemistry, foreign languages, speech language pathology, occupational therapy, physical therapy, those areas, you can come in and you are negotiating directly with human resources, right? Like they are not, or if they do, if they pull out a schedule and they say, here's where you're at, and you say, here's where you need to put me for me to be here. I need this plus $25,000 plus this. And most of these districts are seriously trying to make that work, or some compromise, or they just accept it. And again, I hear it now for the first time ever from my superintendents of saying, yeah, I mean, if somebody comes in and we have a high need area and, we've gotten one application for that, and we've posted in all 50 states and in international sites and stuff like that. What does it take? You'd have to cancel those class sections. Maybe you lose an entire program because you don't have a tech ed, teacher. So you lose that, or CAD, or if you don't have a speech language pathologist, right? You have this area where you're non-compliant with your IEPs, with your federal law, and you can get dinged and have lawsuits, because of that. So this is happening. People are coming in and they're negotiating. I don't think teachers are good negotiators, because most teachers have had a union that does negotiating for them. That kind of has changed in some areas. Wisconsin in 2011 lost a lot of the union negotiation, especially for salary. But for the most part, teachers just aren't used to this. This isn't their style. Maybe like new teachers are, but teachers in general. So I think we're also going to have teachers are going to someone is going to come in and say, listen, I'll be your agent. Here's okay, like where do you want to work? Like as a new teacher, especially like if you can move anywhere, if you're not really bound. And someone said, okay, if you agree to go to this district for 3 years, like they will give you a $55,000 bonus, and pay like relocation, and they'll give you a $10,000 stipend at the GM dealership, so you can get a brand new, Chevy Cruze or whatever it is. Not for 10,000, but I think you'll see that where you'll have these stipends where you can buy things from the community, so that at least the taxpayers think the money is coming back into the community for these bonuses. I think that's going to happen. I think this will happen in any time, any moment. Someone is going to come up and say, hey, like, contact me. And what you will owe me then as a headhunter, and superintendents already do this. Superintendents in schools typically pay an agency or multiple agencies $5,000, $10,000, and that agency represents them. And it's usually the same agency on the back end that a school district is hiring to look for a superintendent. And they're saying, oh, by the way, like we have some candidates and here's one. So at least they're saying, we'll get you an interview. Like, you'll be one of the 3 interviewed. So that's been around for like at least 5 years. The superintendency has really become a agent driven area. But I think you're going to see this for at least some of the teaching positions. And would it work? I think it would. If you had someone who was out there and was saying, hey, like, I'm going to monitor these districts across the country. What do you want? Like, do you want to be hiking outdoors? Does it not matter? And big city, small city, and things, time frame and whatever, and almost customize it out. And then, they might see a posting in a district, right? And go to the district as the agent and say, I've got somebody, they've got 2 years of experience and whatever, they're fully licensed, or, and if you want to, interview them and whatever, and if it does work out where they take the job, then, right, the headhunter gets, whatever payment, $5,000, $10,000. But, I think that's going to happen. I think 100% that's going to happen. Whether it's going to be widespread, I don't think so. But think a sports agent. I think that type of thing will happen. And yeah, so somewhere you'll come back and you'll be, hey, heard about it. So that's it. Teachers are going to start to be contacted. Now, one thing, I get contacted on a pretty regular basis by people, right, who try to recruit me in, and the bonuses and the packages, right, are getting higher. But they know they can only put so much out there, because you're going to come and you're going to ask them for, I want this as additional money. I want additional money into my state retirement. I want more days off or whatever. And it was unheard of, right? 3-4 years ago that schools would accommodate this. Now they have to, because if it's a matter of you taking the job for school that starts next week, or them having to keep it posted, when they've had it posted for 4 months, they've interviewed one person who wasn't remotely qualified, they're taking you. And that HR person and that superintendent, they're going to sit down with the Board of Education and say, listen, this is where things are at. We can have somebody here, but it's going to take this. And if we don't have them here, we might have to cancel these sections. And then also, like, kids need so many sections of whatever in high school, math to graduate, and they're not going to have it. We're going to have them do it like remote learning math, and parents aren't going to want that. So they'll open and enroll their kids out. And then we lose money because head counts generate dollars for schools. So it just spirals. But, with my background, I've thought about this a little bit. So my background is speech language pathology before administration. So I still hold my speech language, my 3C certificate of clinical competence. And I hold my state license in Wisconsin. I also hold it in California. And if I were to go out this week, right, and say, I want to work this upcoming year for a district, right? If that was my, and by a fly swatter. So, I would say I would be able to negotiate on a school district contract, if it was Wisconsin, 100 to 110,000. And if I was doing California, maybe 150 to 180. I'm saying that's on a school contract, 180 days. And I might be able to get some things thrown in there, like additional payments into state retirement or something like that. But I would say that would really be, and within a couple of days, like that would be done. like that deal will be sealed. So with a full benefit package to go with that. So that's where things are at. Retirement packages have lost their appeal. Let me get into that. Obeyance agreement. My goodness, Andrew. Wow. Our friend Bolo. Thanks, Bolo, for keeping up the watch hours. Appreciate it. Discipline is defined in two realities. One is within, one is without. If you need discipline, in my opinion, pain is the best educator. No consequences promotes less discipline. So, all right, that's from Bolo. And, I think what I see is when we don't have consequences, then there is, it really blurs the lines of right, what can I get away with and what can't I get away with? And we need to superimpose those I think in the formative years of kids, into that system. And so let's retirement packages. So, but before we do that, hang with me. We're going to do a little pause for the cause here, a little commercial break, and I'll be right back.
Yum, yum. It's time for a tasty and refreshing snack.
Hey everyone, we are back. So this is a great show. Enjoying this one very, very, very much. So, all right. So we're talking about teacher, right? There's a big shortfall, not enough teachers, right? And so you can do one of two things usually. One is you can lower the barrier of entry. So you can say, oh, you don't need a teaching degree if you have previous experience in another field, or if you're retired or out of the military, you can come over and be a teacher, right? Which we wouldn't probably think about doing for any other field. But there's also this thing I wanted to mention, like, oh, we'll bring in the National Guard to teach. Yeah, but the National Guard, like, there was one guy who came in to teach, and he was actually a teacher. So they took him from his teaching job to come in and then to teach at a different school. It's really weird. So you're always taking people from somewhere if you're doing the National Guard swap. So that's not a long-term solution. But yeah, we can lower the barrier to entry, which in some cases might make sense, right? I don't think you have to go through all this crazy, certifications, all this stuff for school, what it is today versus what it was, when I was going through in the 90s. But, or you can raise pay, but usually you don't have those happen at the same time. Now you've got them happening. And what we talked about already in the show, we talked about why, so you put $50,000 to work 1 year in the Des Moines school district, and you're like, and these are for people who are going to retire out of there. So everybody probably live in Des Moines, like, they're already set up, and it's just making a decision. Yeah, I'll come back for a bonus of 50,000 for a year, and they're not doing it. So, this whole thing where you can put these bonuses and this pay out there and recruit people, other industries are doing that, and people just don't want to come into the system. We talked about why some of that is happening. And I think one is, the Obama to your colleague letter. And just like, in schools for a while, again, they're going through this thing of your classroom, like how your classroom test out on the WKC, different exams, right, will always be linked to you, and people will be able to search you publicly and find how you're, so if out of a 4, your students performed a 3.1, and all these things are completely out of your control and all these variables, but they wanted to do this. I don't know if it was to try to put this different spin on prestige of the industry of teaching. I don't know what it was. It was not handled well, and now teachers are. It definitely contributed to this massive $200,000-$300,000 shortage. So let's talk about retirement packages. One of the ways schools recruited people, this is pretty. It was a robust state pension. So, and schools would add to that. They would say, this was up until maybe 10 years ago. So when I went into teaching, here's what they would do. They would say, we contribute, so whatever your starting salary is, 7% of that we put into the state retirement for you, which is kind of like a 401k, but it's a state pension plan. And then out of your salary, you put 7%. So it's a 1-to-1 match. You can put in more, but we won't match beyond that. But that'd be a pretty good setup. Like, after, what they do is they have a formula and say, hey, if you teach here, by the time at 55, if you retire with 30 years experience, you will get your 3 highest years of salary will be averaged, and you'll get 40% of that for the rest of your life. Again, which isn't a bad deal. I mean, it's a and you don't have to do anything. We'll manage everything for you. There'll be no management fees. There'll be like this, all these things. All you got to do is come to work, right? We got all the retirement stuff. And if you move to a different school, right, it's still the same package, right? So you're not going to lose out. That's part of it, where if you don't like this school district, or for some reason you move to another school district in the state, you'll just continue in the same retirement system. So that was a big pitch. And then they would say, when you retire from the district, we'll also give you 3 or 5 years where you can be on our health insurance. And they'll give you a lump sum payment, or they'll give you like your last year, like double your last year's salary. So I know when I was, I didn't retire. I'm younger than 55. I left before technical retirement age. But I would have had, basically like a 1 year salary that would have been paid out to me upon if I was 55 and had submitted all my retirement stuff. So these things are all kind of gone right now. Schools aren't, let me fix that. Schools aren't offering to pay like your health insurance between necessarily like if you retire at 55 until 65 or 60 to 65. That's kind of gone out with the last couple of years. But the other part is if you're sitting down with a young person, or let's say I say young person, like somebody under 40, and you're saying, hey, like if you do this and you're with us for 20 or 25 years, like you'll stay, they're like, I don't care. I have no idea what's going to happen in 20 to 25 years. And will the system even be around? Will Social Security be around? Like in the last 3 years, we've had a pandemic, we've had civil unrest. I had to stay at my home. We had inflation, and so they'll be like, what? I mean, they're going to look at you and say, you're going to promise me this stuff 20, 30 years from now. And I'm just trying to get to you next week, right? I want money in my pocket now. I don't want the promise. This isn't, going to work in 1950 and I'm going to stay with the company until, I retire at 62. Like where I'm not too far from, there's a very large paper mill which was closed down and sold, and it was a family paper mill. It started in like the 1880s, and the Mead family, George Mead, and actually did a lot of philanthropy for the city and the area. And that's not where I live; it's not too far away, but massive paper mill. And people would go there like right out of high school or whatever and get a job, and they'd work there for 30, 40 years and retire. Have a great pension, all that. And then the place is shut down, right? It's gone. So like anyone looking at this and all the changes that have happened in education of, now remote learning and in schools not being in person and this stuff, and you can't sell that. No one is going to sit there and say, oh yeah. Now, if you restructured this and said, we will give you, let's hypothetically say we will give you a payment for a $10,000 I bond or savings bond, or into a Roth IRA that you own right into your own account. Will make a payment. There's another part here. You have to have vesting. I think the vesting is like 5 years. That was usually never a problem in schools because people always worked 5 years if you got a school job, or, at some point you'd accumulate your 5 years and be able to get at least a very small pension. But now, like, again, if you're approaching this as kind of a first job, or again, you're maybe under 35, 40 years old, and it's like, well, you got to be with it 5 years to get any of the money we put in back out. Otherwise, you just get the money that you took out. So, vesting. But this model doesn't work. And besides that, this to try to convince people, and the HR people still do it. And I just read an article by the National Education Association and a couple others with HR folks who are so out of touch anyway with things in schools. But they're saying, the fact St. Louis HR folks said, we talked to our teachers and only 10% of them knew that we have the state retirement, which I don't know how true that is, but or like how it gets contributed and what it means to them and stuff. And so really the problem is we have a great retirement, but they don't know about it. I'm like, well, maybe that's part of it, but you cannot approach teachers today and say, here's this retirement plan that we're going to have for you, which you won't be able to touch until 30 years from now. But when you do touch it 30 years from now, it'll lay a golden egg for you every month, right? Till the day you die. People are like, again, I've been the last 3 years, right? If I go back, 10 years, a housing crash and this and GM going bankrupt and, Lehman Brothers and, again, pandemic and riots and inflation and housing prices going crazy. People are like, I think it's called crowd-in behavior. I wrote about it in Velocity of Information, but people are wanting to keep a lot of control. The locus of control is very close. It's very, very difficult to plan out more than a year, maybe right now. So the way that retirement being, so this is what's happening is, so the money isn't bringing people in and into education, right? The bonuses, those types of things. So the HR people are saying, and the unions are saying, well, the retirement is great. And it really is, like, if you can make it to the end. But they're saying, we don't educate people well enough about that. So we need to go on a campaign of educating people about retirement. You're going to get these excellent retirement benefits. But again, that is this thing of people don't care, right? You could tell somebody, I believe you could tell somebody today, we're going to hire you, and 30 years from now, or you retire at 55 and you've got in 25 years in education in our state, we will give you a check for $2 million or $3 million, right? I mean, it's all inflation adjusted, but we'll give you a one-out check, right? And people be like, no. I mean, it's kind of like a lottery option. It'd be kind of interesting. Like if you had a study where you had people and said, we promise you like that we will give you a check for $3 million, and maybe after taxes, right, on the day you retire after you're like 55, if you put in 25 years. Or if you say, well, instead of that, we will give you for the next 3 years, we'll give you $20,000 a year more. So you have 60,000 versus like 3 million. What would you do? And so it'd be interesting, because I think there'd be a number of people over here in the $60,000 camp who'd be like, well, I've got it right now. This is happening. I don't know what inflation will happen down. I don't know if the dollar be devalued. I don't know if there'll be a digital dollar. How this will impact me. And if I'm getting that, it's likely that that's not going to go away. That $20,000 will continue, and I can maybe negotiate for more, right? But it's right now I can have it. So this whole thing of like these delayed packages, these post-retirement benefit packages, they're outdated. They don't mean anything to people anymore unless you're kind of close to that. But then it's really a weird thing too. Like if you're coming into education from another field and you're 45 years old and they're like, well, you got to have really like 15 years to make it pay in the state retirement. So you get at least something that you could combine with Social Security and kind of live on. People are like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, so there's a sweet spot too, where you really got to sell it to people from the time they first get their teaching license to maybe when they're 35. And if you haven't sold it by then, the pension thing isn't really going to work. So, and again, I mean, think of everything that we've gone through. One day you're wake up, you're essential or non-essential. And I just, there's so much uncertainty. So again, my point is this is now the approach where the unions and even the financial people in the state that run these programs they're shifting and saying, oh, the reason we don't have teachers, or a big reason, is we're not educating them about their retirement benefits. And if they knew about that, how much better it is than private sector, I guess, or how this is really largely guaranteed, which I would say to some extent that's accurate, to not a full extent, right? I know people in Illinois, friends of mine, who've received letters of saying when you retire, you're guaranteed, 0.875% of what you initially were guaranteed. But this doesn't work. This is the generation that is taking their lunch break and, from whatever job they're doing, and they're trading stocks on Robinhood, right? They are looking to the next day, or maybe the next year. It's still a crowd in behavior. These are not people who are planning years and years and years out. And these are people who expect that they will work in 20 different places or more before they retire. Maybe part of that's going to be an entrepreneurial type thing. So retirement packages have lost all appeal. I completely believe that, especially, trying to convince young people to say 30 years from now. Look at all the promises we've kind of broken to the younger generation already, and what they've gone through the last 3 years. So the point there is, this is where the pivot is happening right now. You will see articles in your local newspapers. You'll see things on TV and all that. And people say you're going to see this swing around to the retirement package won't make a lick of difference. Now, I love the movie Moneyball with about the Oakland A's, Jonah Hill, Brad Pitt, one of my favorite movies. And I believe in education right now, we are hitting the Moneyball um, framework, right? By the way, subscribe, tell your friends if you're new. And we've been at 1,190 subscribers here for about 3 years, give or take two. Hit the thumbs up. But there'll be a full blog post coming out at Safety PhD probably by Sunday, Monday night. It's basically all written, but I have to got some other things cooking. So Moneyball. So what was Moneyball? So the Oakland Athletics, I say this as I have to look it up on the other screen here. So never did add the fourth screen, which I don't know. So in 2003, the Oakland Athletics, Billy Beane was the manager, and the Oakland Athletics had only so much money to compete. It was, so all these major league teams, Yankees, a ton of money and whatever, but the Oakland Athletics were running basically kind of a shoestring budget for Major League Baseball. So what they were doing, Billy Beane sat down and they were working all of the analytics, and they were trying to figure out who could we get to help us this season? Like, out of everybody out there, what could we assemble? Maybe somebody who was once a pitcher and was a pretty good hitter, like could be over at first base, no longer pitching and a hitter. And maybe that'll work for a year. Maybe someone who's toward the end of their career, like we could sign them and keep them for a year, whatever. But it was like for that year. So that's part of this is the focus. And by the way, just in closing things out here, I just lost my podcast notes. There we go. The focus, schools have got to adapt unless you're in this handful of kind of, these wealthy suburban districts where, people have their homes there and they're not going to be moving, right? And so you're going to have more stability in your schools. But a number of schools are going to be in this Oakland Athletics predicament. I would say more than half, and they're going to have to look at, like, Houston. How do we field the team for this year? Houston School District, Nevada School District. I mean, how do we field a team through the end of May? Versus, like, how do we recruit somebody and then we're going to build up and they're going to have more opportunity. There'll be a department chair. They'll be coaching. It's like, no, like maybe that'll happen, but how do you find these people? How do you find their skill sets that might be able to come in and you might be able to use them in this capacity? And maybe they've never done this before, right? Or maybe someone who was an aide that could get an emergency license because they're really good with, something, right? They're really good with some of the technology, stuff. So we could get them in and use them in that capacity. So now studies have been shown, one of the things that people will stay at a job if they feel they have a friend there, right? Or if they have friends there. Now it's kind of weird because like work, there's only, like the show The Office is probably more genuine, right? Of like, you have work friends, but I mean, if people feel that they have a friend or some friends at work, the other, one of the factors, like the people above them have their back or don't throw one under the bus. But I think it's a Moneyball approach. It was novel when Billy Beane did it with the Athletics, and then other major league franchises kind of caught on, and now a number of them do that. Milwaukee Brewers, stuff like that. But I think the approach it has to change. It has to change where HR comes in and says, what do we do? And they have to be with boards of education and administrators. How are you a principal? How are you a principal when you know that you're kind of like a coach? Then you've got that team for one season, and 95% of them aren't coming back for the next year. Maybe half of them are, right? This is the new model in maybe half the districts. Maybe you have up to half your staff, leaving in a year that you have to replace. So how do you train administrators? That's one thing I assemble my syllabi I work on is saying, you should, one of the things you always have to be thinking about now as an administrator is induction of how things are done around here, from a school safety standpoint to how people set schedules up, and all of these things of because someone is not going to have 25 years of knowledge, and they're not going to have what's called legacy knowledge, like saying my dad was a teacher and his dad was a teacher, or and stuff like that, where it passes down. In the 9/11 harbor rescue in Lower Manhattan, September 11, 2001, a lot of the boat captains, tugboat captains who participated in rescues, they had been captain. Their families had done that for 200 years. 200 years. Their family crest was on the boat, right? And that's the part that's going to be gone, or it is gone. You have to realize it in education. You have to stop kidding yourself too, as educators and all of in this. It's not only education profession, right? But let's say in education, no one is coming forward and acknowledging it's a Moneyball situation right now. It is fielding a roster for this team. We have to change professional development to scale people up the fastest we can in these very complex systems. And how you especially how you interface with students with special needs, with IEPs, with autism. You might have behavior training where some staff, have all this training that typically they would have received, and how do you condense it to get that to them, and then if they leave, get it to somebody else. So that's something I'm addressing in my classes. I've done it for the last few years, and I've even updated it this year. And it's the thing where I would present it 3-4 years ago, people would say like, okay, like, I know what you're trying to do here. And now they would stop and say, yeah, that happened in my district. That's happening right now. We have 4 emergency licenses at the elementary level in a district of, like 600 kids, K-12 or something. I mean, so it's a change where people are saying, yep, that's happening. Like it's happening right now. And you have to be realistic, like your Board of Education, and also these states aren't realistic, right? The states who are giving state report cards out to, so schools can compare against each other, and kind of this competition. It's like, it's not fair to schools. Like our state superintendent of education has been quiet. I mean, that's a person I barely hear anything about, and seeing her come forward and say, here's right, that things are changing, like districts are, and kind of like leading that to snowplow that a little bit for districts as they get into this, and to have their back, when there's things happening like students not hitting their minutes of instruction, or school saying, hey, like we can't offer foreign language anymore because we can't get the teachers, and we try to do it remotely, but it's all filled up or whatever. And so Moneyball and K-12 education, I think it's here. And so what does that mean? It means your business manager is really kind of almost like a sports manager. Like that's where I said you're going to be recruiting people. People are going to work with agents, education agents, and they're going to have, kind of a resume. They'll have a resume put together, maybe like a short video thing or some demo stuff. And that might be sent out in as a human resources person or human resources and principal. And this is also going to accelerate the hiring process. In the past, you could interview, might have 10, 15 applications. You interview 3 to 5 people, you bring a couple people back. Not anymore. Like you probably are doing one interview because they'll go somewhere else. Like if you get an interview, if they cross your path, you've got to move. And if you don't, they're going to go somewhere else. So you got to be able to make a decision and what you're doing. I mean, this is just absolutely crazy. And we know that certified public accountants, like if you got to pick a career, that's your career, or working for the IRS. But welcome to Chad Elkins in the house, by the way. Chad, I absolutely love your show. I've been catching it, but because I've been super chatting, I'm not. You did give me quite a few nods during the show, so I do appreciate it. And your show's awesome, by the way. And Chad is offering, or will be offering, some online courses in the next few months of some areas to consider if you're looking in accounting. Like from bookkeeping to entry level accounting to pathways into higher level accounting. Chad's a CPA who owns his own CPA business, and I have a ton of respect for Chad. So, in talking about what Chad is doing, though, he's doing this. So there are people who might be thinking, I could go into teaching, or hey, I just watched this, video that Chad put out. Like I just bought this to learn more about how to be a bookkeeper and it's remote work and some paths forward with that, and I can make the same amount of money or more money, or I'm not interfacing day to day with all these different regulations and maybe upset parents and this different turnover. I can kind of turn it into an entrepreneur thing. So this is where I think education sometimes, or a lot of times, thinks they operate in a bubble, like the outside world isn't happening of these evolutions. So Chad Elkins is saying, Doc, it's all about the garbage salad. Next one's on me, probably not Clary. So I appreciate that. Garbage salad is good. And then after you're done with the garbage salad, you have to eat your meal as fast as you can. So if it takes more than 2 minutes, it's not going to cut it. So I remember watching a show where they interviewed prisoners, and one of the prisoners said, you got to learn to eat really fast. So I had a friend in the Navy who said the same thing. Chow time was cooking. Andrew is saying, I know how to keep teachers' pizza party. So I think there are things that happen in the teaching profession. I want to touch on this, and where it doesn't do anything really positively to promote teaching. I think it has the inverse effect. When there's Teacher Appreciation Week in my district, because I'm usually down at the track and stuff like that, and what they do is they take out the metal post, right, and they take out the vinyl sign, and it says this is Teacher Appreciation Week in district, and they stake them in front of the lawns, and then if it rains or a little windy or in a day or two, like they kind of slope inward and the sign kind of crumples down, and it's like, okay, yeah, it's those types of things. Or we're doing a pizza party for staff. I remember once, and I'll never forget this. We had an administrator who got Kentucky Fried Chicken to cater a teacher appreciation event, and afterwards shared with me. I was not an administrator at the time. Shared with me, hey, I got a great deal in this because like some of the chicken and the biscuits were a day old, and I'm like, why would you even tell me that, for one? And you're trying to do this appreciation thing on the cheap, but I think some of these things are right of pizza party and stuff. It's kind of like when Aaron Clary said, hey, I he said, when I was going and getting my first jobs in banking, Aaron Clary, right? So he said, I went to one bank, and he drove, like 10 hours or whatever from Minneapolis to South Dakota. And he said, this bank was, so this again, early in his banking finance career. One of the things when they were going through the interview is they were saying, oh, we want people to our workers to be involved in the community and whatever, and things. And then I think they called him back and they weren't sure whether to offer him the position or not. And they just said, you didn't seem like you're really into like the whole community vibe and stuff. He's like, oh, I'm more about doing the job, right, of making sure people aren't trying to Xerox their own checks that they write, to themselves and deposit them here, which I think happened. But then, when they backpedaled and said, well, of course we want you here and stuff, he's like, well, this is not the vibe. I don't want to be there. I don't want to be brought into these things where, I have to do all these kind of goofy stunts with the clients and put on all of these things, and I see that happening too, it never set well with me when teachers or schools will do these things where they'd be like, oh, like if you read so many books, you get to duct tape a teacher to a wall for the morning or something like that, or the principal will be up on top of the building having to do his work up there, or a pie in the face of somebody. I mean, those are real gimmicky, and I think they're real. You wouldn't do that in a profession type thing, right? I mean, I think there's other ways to approach stuff like that. Like maybe if you do whatever, we'll bring in the local drone guy who has the drone business. For example, there's a guy who lives a couple houses from me. He's a good friend of mine. He has a drone business he started, and now he's hired on people. It's really cool. It's down in a bigger city. He actually takes his electric bike to work every day. But like we'll bring in this guy, and he'll show you like a drone that's the size of a nickel, and like a $50,000 drone that they use to inspect power poles, or they like use for rescues on the Wisconsin River. And I mean, like every kid would be like, oh my God, like, hey, we're going to read, each classroom is going to read 1,000 books or whatever. But so I think those whole pie in the face type of things are another, I don't think it portrays the profession well. John is saying kids are being homeschooled more now. They need less teachers? They're firing in some places. If that's happening, homeschooling is going up. Money following the student, so charter and private schools is increasing. I think Arizona just passed that, so that is happening too. So yeah, I mean those things are happening. I think right. If we actually look at the number of students in schools versus where we were like 5 years ago, now numbers of students who are homeschool, or I don't know if the numbers are really changing that much. In some places they're getting less, but the staffing is going up, right? So I know a lot of places where I started out where there was like a principal for a K-8, and now there's like a principal, an assistant principal, a K-8 director of instruction, a K-8 diversity coordinator, a K-8 teacher coach. I mean, that's like 4 new positions right there. So these positions have gone up. Now we talked about these bonuses and these other things. That goes right back to the taxpayers. A number of states have where during certain circumstances, you can go outside of your mill rate, your rate per what you're charging per $1 million of property. You can make an exception to that for certain conditions, and some of that falls under these hiring things. So you end up as a taxpayer, if your district starts to go off the rails on this, your taxes will go up, right? And not only that, like once this kicks off, one district does it, the neighboring district does it. Part of it is they have to do it to be competitive. Part of it is social proof, right? Oh, we have 2 other districts, 3 districts in the conference are doing it. Now we have to do it. The other thing is there are usually boards of education usually have processes where they're saying we will always be in the top half of our conference for compensation. Well, that changes really fast when you have 3 out of 10 districts now offering these bonuses or offering to so what happens if you hire a chemistry teacher and you instead of hiring that teacher at $50,000, you hire that teacher at $80,000, and the existing chemistry teacher who's been there, let's say 4 years, is making $62,000. So this 4-year teacher teaches chemistry. Now you've added another one. So, say you're growing, you have 2 sections of chemistry. Suddenly they knock on your door and they say, hey, like you just hired this person for $18,000 more than me, and I've been here 4 years. So there's something called make me whole. Make me whole. And that's saying if somebody that does what I do with a license and teaches the same or very similar type things gets hired in higher than I am, you will adjust my pay. Now that happens sometimes, and other times it doesn't. Other times, the moment you do this with teachers and you pay somebody higher and it gets out, everybody lines up at the superintendent's door. Like I have a superintendent friend who was telling me this like 2 years ago. He said, we hired somebody, right, for a tech ed teacher, and we paid them $85,000, $90,000, which was double like what an elementary teacher was making. Then he said, of course, the next day, every teacher in the district wanted an appointment with me, wanted to negotiate and stuff. And he just said, no, like this was a very high needs area. We have $1 million worth of equipment, and this launches into our partnership with our tech colleges. And it's almost like saying, part of it's essential, non-essential. Like if we post for an elementary position to teach third grade, maybe we'll get 7 or 10 applicants. Maybe if we post this position, which we've done for this high school tech ed, we might get one position from 50 states, one applicant from 50 states. So then, yeah, people get really upset because back in the days, right, when everything was on a salary scale and the unions were very strong, if you came into a school, you're making that money kind of regardless. Every year you got more, you moved up the scale. If you took more classes, you kind of moved up. So yeah, this is something where the implication for taxpayers is pretty nuts, because districts can increase their payroll 20-30% short term. And are the states going to come in and slap their hand and regulate them? Where's this money going to come from? Is it going to come from fund balance? Schools have that, maybe short term. Right now, the Recovery Act money, they're hiring staff out of this. Are they going to flex the money coming in for mental health and either hire teachers with it, or like add some pseudo training to a teacher and say, oh, it's in vivo mental health, which is going to be delivered as the teacher teaches or something? I don't know. But it is crazy. It is absolutely crazy to look at this teacher recruitment. So, and that's part of today's show is I looked at this and started to see what Des Moines was doing, of saying, hey, we'll pay $50,000 more in Georgia, these big bonuses for like a year. If we can squeeze a year of service out of you. And the thing is, like, where's this money coming from? We've gotten into, at a government level at least, right? There's no sense of accountability, right? With inflation, you just print off more money. There's another 800 billion printed off. And so, what does it mean to be 25 trillion in debt versus 38 trillion in debt? They're both abstract numbers. No one really knows. Chad probably knows, but you get to this point where it really gets abstract for people. And then with a board of education, and these are people at the lowest level of politics you get voted in, right? And now that these are easy positions, I'm saying board of education, there's turnover in that, and board of education and your superintendent. The superintendent's going to say, you got to give me people to work with. Like if I don't have staff, what am I supposed to do? And the soup will leave. Soups can go places. They can get out of there. So then if this kind of turnover, and if you have at least your superintendent there, that's something you can try to get some initiatives, rolling, some stability. So it is this vicious circle, but it's kind of like letting the genie out of the box. I don't know, the genie was in a box. So no, the genie out of the jar. Lamp. Genie lamp. Once you do the bonuses and once you do these short-term packages for people, you can't go back. It just doesn't work in reverse. And what'll happen then, if you try to reverse it and say, oh, we're going back to like a salary lane schedule of so many years, and professional people say, I'm not in it, right? They're like, I know Chad Elkins is putting out a series of classes that I can pay whatever, $800,000 for, and I can learn kind of the nuts and bolts of how I could get in and get some certifications in bookkeeping, or some entry level accounting and things like this, and without having to go into debt, without having to be into all of these progressive credentialism systems, and and that's an option for me, and maybe there's a lot of appeal, and plus it's a transferable skill, like to your own personal management of life and finances. That's where I think like a CPA has or if like you're a CPA or a nurse, for example, like having those skills apply to everyday life, what you're doing. So you're a nurse, right? You're not feeling well, or your kids are sick, or your kid breaks a bone or whatever, or something happens, you can immediately put into play those skills, right? I mean, if you're a CPA, of course, it's you're managing your own personal finances. I mean, you understand how all that works. Um, so Andrew is saying, hire the smartest kid in the class to teach. Somebody That's been done more than once. I think if you did a Google search, you'll find where high schools, I think, just turned it over to a kid who was doing really well, and not a lot. Like there's a handful of those instances, but it. I worked in a school district that this was back in the year 2000, 2001. Worked in a district, smaller district, maybe 1,200 kids, K-12, rural district, not super rural, but they had, um, they hired, I think, 5, 6 high school kids to teach staff how to use their computers. This was back when computers were still kind of new and email, and they would hire them to like show them how to access, like how to print to this printer, but these kids were paid by the district, and they were under the supervision of the tech coordinator who gave them some kind of like you know crash course in this stuff. But these kids already had like innate ability in this, and it was a smart move for the district, right? Because you're getting 6 kids, stuff that they can put on a resume. It eased the burden significantly, um, and and at that time it's a lot different than today. Having to set up and maintain all these computers and all these. The computers were in computer labs. They weren't just a notepad, stuff like that. But there is something to that. Of at what point do we take students and move them into some peer teaching role? Um, I think there's a lot to be said about that as part of just the education and learning model. I read a really good blog post yesterday on LinkedIn, and it was someone who said, you have to teach people. This wasn't like a education threat, but like you have to teach people the art of discussion, not necessarily debate. That was the thing where Larry Lottenmerker's biggest jewel thief. What he does now is he said, like young people don't know how to debate, take a position on things. They immediately like defend a position or like pull out a gun and shoot you because you don't agree with them. You have to be able to debate positions. Like what are the merits of that position or my position? You might not agree, right? But we used to have debate teams in high school. It used to be on the Saturday night TV when I was growing up, like our local rural high school debate team. But yeah, now it's this article said it's not debate. It's really just how do you discuss things, just to bring up a topic, right? And how you, geez, I don't know, I can flying around here, but so I probably should have like reposted. I'll never find it again. But it was very specific on here are some ways to just have a discussion because a debate gets more formal and you get, you know, your steps through that of understanding your opponent's position and yours. But I'm saying like we got to teach people just how to have discussions. This thing is like dive bombing me here. I don't know what's going on. But so yeah. Anyway, kind of going back on the Solitude server, Aladdin. You're going to the genie in the bottle. So yeah, where did we kind of end up here? Is schools are paying bonuses, and some of them, I guess, relative what you consider a big bonus. $50,000 Des Moines Public Schools for, and again, we're kind of seeing this all over. Once it happens in one, if it happens in, all right, there we go. Let me do this. I'm trying to sync up some of the video stuff. So, all right, looks like we're back. F. All right, I think we're okay. So yeah, this whole thing of bonuses is it's not working. And you'll see something out there where some community, philanthropist, right, is going to donate whatever, and teachers will suddenly have $100,000 bonus, right? Or they'll. I think where you're going to have to go with this for teachers, so you don't have taxpayers really get angry, is you'd have to do something of saying we're going to do a bonus of 50,000, and the local GM in like the local whatever places you're going to give them credits. So let's say, because then at least you could say, oh, the money's going to stay in the community. I'm not saying this makes a hell of a lot of sense. I'm just saying like this makes more sense than just saying we're going to give somebody $50,000 or $75,000 out of public funding, right? So I think you could say we're doing a $50,000 bonus, and then they will have another 25,000, and it has to be spent at any of these participating local businesses. So right, it's probably going to be automotive. Would be one. I don't know what the local businesses would be, right? I don't know what that. But if you can make it seem that these dollars are being recirculated into the community, then maybe it shows some vesting, and I don't know. But right, that's a snake biting its own tail. I mean, pretty soon you're going to have people in an area, competing. Well, I'll go, here's $100,000 bonus, here's $110,000 bonus, or I mean, it'll just kind of collapse in on itself. So I don't know. And then when if these districts do kick off, and the wealthier districts or the suburban districts, which are typically doing pretty well as far as like staff retention and stuff, like if they get in the game and they're going to start offering bonuses, then they're just going to they're going to accelerate this pattern of these smaller districts kind of going extinct because they're just not going to have the staff. Again, it's so ironic because we have $1 billion now going into school mental health. So you're going to hear that over and over and over and over and over and over again. $1 billion going into school mental health out of the Safer Communities bill that was passed and into law. Who's going to do that? Like, it's kind of, Chad Elkins had said this on his recent show. He said, IRS agents, right? You're going to hire 80,000 or whatever. Who are you going to hire? Where are these people coming from? Because there's already a shortage of accountants, and Chad is a CPA. I mean, so significantly experienced and credentialed. But where are these people going to come from? There's going to be and it's one of these things in his field. Like as you hire IRS agents, you're going to inversely have more accountants and CPAs and tax attorneys come up on the other side to counter that. So, but yeah, what my recommendation would be right now to anybody teaching is whatever contract you have, like I would go and I would free agent this. I would go in and try to find out if anybody around you, at least in the media, right, is doing bonuses or they're posting any of this. And I would meet with HR and say, this is what I need, because this is what's happening. This is what other areas and what my change of pay is and keeping up with inflation. HR will probably come back, oh, your benefits and other stuff, and say, here's the deal. I'm going to start looking. So the next time I come in here is probably with my resignation letter. I mean, I do think it's that way. And if it's one of those things, like it's an off season for you, right? Like you're heading into the end of the school year and you've got to look forward to, so what's around you, or what might you want to do remote, or is there a district that'll say, yeah, we'll do 4 days and you can do another day of online class. I mean, you can negotiate these things out now. I don't think you necessarily have to like up the stakes and leave, but I would really look at that. And I think for young people coming out, so let's hypothetically say I'm 22 years old, I have my teaching license, I would want to, and I think experience, it's good as Aaron Clary, you're a reconnaissance man, check different places to live. I'd want to say, like, I want to go somewhere where the weather's warm and I can hike or bike most of the year, and go down there and just say, find these places where you might want to go, do some reconnaissance, check it out. And whatever they're paying, say, hey, like, I'm not from here, but I'll come down here if you give me this plus whatever, $25,000, because I have to relocate, I have to do whatever. And they can say, those, if they say no, they say no. So then I've got other issues. I know Houston, you're short 2,000 teachers. And you could have me, right? And I'm going to be down here. I'm coming, to work every day, or you can have that position empty, and you might have to cut a section, or you're going to have to combine. And if you combine, people aren't going to stay around; they're going to take off. So, a teacher who's got 40 kids is going to look for a district that offers a, class size of 18 or 20. So there's a lot of power. You just have to know how to negotiate, and that's something, right? What teachers, that's not part of their makeup, right? They don't know that innately coming in, how to negotiate. It really is going to be person by person dependent, but it's not a field where you negotiate. It's not like attorneys, right? Where everything is interpretation and negotiation and stuff like that. So I believe, and I've done this with some of my clients, and I changed my consulting model where I really eased off of it. I mean, significantly, after the pandemic. During the pandemic, like, it was absolutely, like, people couldn't get enough of your time. And then it was kind of like, well, I need time. I need time to be out biking, like yesterday, doing 70 miles, and doing, writing my books, and doing things that I want to do. Not that I don't want to do the other things, but right, there's a difference between work, and there's a difference between being out for a day biking 70 miles. But know what you're worth. And teachers never get told that, of what your value is. It's always, it's kind of altruism, right? Of giving back, and maybe there's somewhat of that in nursing, or some medical stuff or whatever. But no, like, know what you're worth, and you can put a price tag on that today, and you can negotiate, and you should negotiate. And there are going to be multiple people because of remote work. One of the things for me was, I would have never thought 15 years ago that during the pandemic I would be consulting, from, I don't know, 7 in the morning till 7 at night, because a number of my clients, education consulting, special ed consulting, a number of my clients were in California. Of course, 3 hours ahead. I never thought that would be something you could technologically do, yet that's the world. And I could do everything from right here in this office. Like, I never had to go anywhere. So, yeah, these are things where, come in, know what you're worth, and don't be afraid to negotiate hard, because I can tell you, as the principal is going to be putting heat on the human resources person, whoever's doing that in the district, and the business folks are saying, I cannot, like, do this. We cannot say we're going to have a safe school and we're going to be able to instruct and meet the annual testing requirements if I don't have teachers, right? So you've got to get people down here. People have got to be in this building. They've got to be teaching. The Board of Education is going to hear that, and the Board of Education is also going to hear from the superintendent, from HR. Hey, like, if we have a class size of 40, and our neighboring districts start putting a TV commercial out there and saying, hey, like, we have a class size of 18, and this district next to us has 40, we're going to lose kids to open enrollment, which we lose dollars, $15,000 to $18,000 a kid. And then what happens, right? So, and all of this might be the best time for someone to be a teacher in a very short term time frame, right? Like, to look at 3 to 5 years. And I kind of think in life, that's really how you should approach things now anyway. After writing The Philosophy of Information, I'm like, I think it's important to be very fiscally responsible and kind of conservative, and to have things which are concrete assets and not have debts which are carrying into the future as much as possible. But to say like, you can have goals and stuff, but I think you got to look at the next like 3 to 5 years is really what you're always looking at, then recalibrating. Because again, 5 years ago, remote work was kind of a novelty, right? Remote school, being able to get your groceries, just log into, Walmart or whatever, and you go and pick them up at whatever time. These types of things, remote doctor visits, all this stuff, but these were kind of novelties. A laptop could stay charged for a whole day or 2 days, or these things where you could hold a teleconference just with your phone. We don't realize, right, that this stuff has happened really fast, and it's been amplified. It's been kicked forward like 10 years. I wrote about that in Philosophy of Information by the pandemic. One of the big things in tech out of the pandemic was battery life. So battery life almost doubled during the pandemic because of the research being put into making batteries that could last longer, right, for remote learning and remote medicine and work and all of that stuff. So like the battery you have in your phone, or if you have a new laptop or iPad or whatever, if you take that battery and compare it to the 2019, it's double, if not more. We don't really realize it though, right? We don't realize that we can only use things for a couple hours. Back then we had to plug them in. But that is one of these direct results. So I think you look and you say in 3 to 5 years, and frankly, I can do the job the best that I can do. They're going to give me whatever professional development. I'm going to be very ethical, try to do the best job. But if I can make $50,000 bonus, right? If I can bank that, if I can take out a Roth IRA, if I'm eligible for it, Roth IRA, or if I can, put some money into an I bond right now, which is paying about 9%, right? Or some stable investments, a certificate of deposit, 5-year certificate of deposit paying 3.2%. Now I know it doesn't meet inflation, all these other things. I get it, right? Or you can, go with the brokerage, T. Rowe Price or whatever, and take out your own, IRA and stuff like that. I get it. But I would say, I'm not interested in the state retirement. Like, forget about it. I don't want to participate in it. I don't know if I don't really know how that works. Like in some schools, I think there is an option now where you can kind of like say, I don't want to do that. And then they just give you the money and you manage it yourself. But you got to be like responsible to do that, right? Because at least state retirement will likely be there at some capacity. And these other things, like say I want time off. I want to be able to work from home. Like I want to be, if I'm teaching 4 sections of whatever, I want half of this one section to be done remote. So students will log in asynchronous. So let me develop an asynchronous in your school thing. Like schools have Moodle, schools have stuff. Hey, is anybody listening anymore? I don't see any more posts. So, yeah. So, I don't know. I kind of went off the air for a moment. But anybody out there? Hey! Andrew and South. Good. Cool. So, if you're thinking about, I want to change things up in my life, right? Think about going and applying to be a teacher for a year or two, and an emergency license. All the states have them. It's going to be a steady paycheck. You're probably going to be able to do a signing bonus. But if this is a situation, where right now you're like, I want to do something where, I know I'm going to, not that teaching is all, nights and weekends and summers and all that stuff, but I'm saying if you wanted, something like that, you could get in, and, use the situation to your advantage to be making, this money, and again, reevaluating, what do I really want to do with things? If I really like this, maybe I'll look around at different districts, or do I specialize like into a higher needs area of education, typically like special education or the sciences, where there are less applicants, or what do I want to do? And the thing is, you can get into this now without having necessarily to have gone through 4 years of college, right? So you, instead of coming out with a debt of, 50, 60, $70,000 of student loans, you could go right over to it. And the district will likely pay your credits. If you're going to school at nights or weekends or something, they'll say, there are new teacher programs. They've streamlined a lot of this in states because they're trying to get people certified. So you get hired and say, I got, if I'm going to work here, you've got to be picking up my credits so I can work towards certification. They will likely say yes. So I do think, as we think of the positives in schools, because I don't want to paint this all as like really being a bad. I think schools are handling this whole staff shortage thing not well. Like we're trying to anchor to old models which don't exist. Like wait 30 years and get your pension, and Andrew I think brought it up before. I think there's this novelty aspect for a while that was in schools. Like teachers will take a pie in the face if somebody in a class reads 1,000 books, or will duct tape someone to a wall. Principal in winter will have to be up on a chair on the roof for a day. I think those detract from the profession. Like you wouldn't see that in nursing or engineering, right? Or your city, water and sewer folks or stuff like that. Right? You're just not going to see those things. You'll see some outreach and stuff like that, right? You're not seeing those types of things. I think that's a really bad thing. So I think schools need to just get rid of that. One time I was asked by a counselor when I was an administrator to wear a suit. It was like a purple. It was a completely zip up suit. It was kind of like I would look like the Flash on Frozone. I would look like Frozone on The Incredibles. It was kind of like that. And then part of it was like then I would play like the superhero character for like counseling or something, and there was some theme they were reading at the elementary. But I looked at this thing and I'm like, first, it would be very form fitting, and it was just really weird, right? Like you wouldn't technically know who I am because you couldn't see someone's face through this thing. I just said no, and they were kind of surprised. Well, come on, and I'm like, well, no, this is, I'm I'm not going to do it. And I didn't do it. But Andrew's saying the military has recruitment problems, 250K. So this is Andrew, Andrew's right on. And I talked about this a few minutes ago with, I talked about pharmacists, there's I think some of the big box stores are $75,000 bonus. I've seen quite a bit on advertisements for those positions, but the military, right? Saying we're not hitting recruitment strategies. So you're competing, right? In schools here, you are now competing against the military. You've always been competing to some extent, but now you're directly competing. So, and a recruiter is going to tell a kid that, right? Say a kid saying, oh, I'm thinking like, I wanted to be a teacher and whatever. They'll say, fine, but come in here. We'll get you a bonus. You'll be able to do whatever. And then if you still want to be a teacher, we'll send you to school for that when you're done. So they're like, sure, instead of like going right into teaching. So, 50K bonuses for basic jobs, and they're not getting filled. So this isn't across the board thing. And again, where schools are leaning back is they're saying, oh, but we got this great pension, which to this day, most states have a very good pension, or districts who are outside of a state system have a good pension. But it's something that doesn't work anymore. You can't sell people, especially after the last 3 years of life. You can't sell people and say 30 years from now, 35 years from now, this will be out there for you. And also, like, people be like, but what is, right now, gallon of gas is double what it was 8 months ago, and people are just like, no, man, I need it now, and I need to be in control of it. Like, it needs to be right here. Like my state retirement, I have nothing. I get a statement once a year in the mail, and it's because I'm not doing it anymore with the state. It doesn't change. But I and I'm too young to draw anything from it. But I can't log in. There's no portal. I can't take it. I can't transfer it somewhere. So it's just kind of a crazy thing. But hey, it's Bacon, or from Bacon from Inglewood, California, where there's no shortage of fun. Bourbon of choice. I don't know. I do not know. But welcome to a friend, Bacon. Andrew, the military recruitment can tell that kid he won't get blown away at a school. It is kind of a weird thing, right? A weird way to look at that subject. One of the things people have asked me is, do you think teachers aren't going into teaching because they're afraid of being shot, right? I said, no. Like, that is not, that's just, I haven't heard that yet. Maybe, right, some people, it's impacting their decision, but, right, but we have shootings at parades, or people mowing down people, with vehicles at parades and farmers markets and things like that. I mean, I don't think, I think if there are people who aren't going in because of the fear of a school shooting, there's also people going in to schools because they think they can make a difference in preventing that school shooting, right? So in identifying those students earlier, or being the person who, tackles the student, or, we've seen the videos where there's a video out there somewhere where a student came in with a weapon, a staff member talked them down. And so I think I haven't seen school shootings impact school recruitment. School discipline, though, is big time causing people to not stay. So once you get in, and again, after we look at the 2014 Obama administration, Department of Education, dear colleague letter is a letter that goes out to like all school districts saying, here's what we think you should do, but it's kind of like think as, and here's what you need to do. And if you don't, there's going to be consequences. OCR, Office of Civil Rights, investigated Oakland and Oklahoma City and a number of school districts around 2014, and issued fines because they said they suspended too many students. And so let me just try to find Oak Law. I know you're like, well, it shouldn't matter. OCR fine. All right. Yeah, let's do this. Okay, so let's do a shared screen. Share. Yeah. Share. Yes. Wow. Really hard sell here on the share. All right. So this is from the Washington Post, Oklahoma City. So this article was published 6 years ago. So yeah, 2016. So the Office of Civil Rights, the Obama administration in 2014 sent out the Dear Colleague letter to all schools saying you have to lower suspension numbers in your schools. Basically not saying how to do it, just saying numbers are too high, they have to come down. And if they don't, there's going to be consequences, which would be funding, or, there would be that information would be made public of schools possible. I mean, there's just a lot of things out there. Remember, schools are competing against each other for students, and that's how they survive. Like if they lose 100 students, that's $150,000. That's walking out the door. Did I do that math right? If they lose 10 students, that's 150,000 walking out the door, because they get about 15,000 a student. So anyway, there were many districts, mostly larger, but not always. Around 2016, Office of Civil Rights jumped in, and they were telling these districts, hey, like, you are suspending too many students, and you have to revamp your approach to discipline. So what does that really mean, right? And setting a federal rights investigation that found, this article, African-American children were referred for disciplinary action at a significantly higher rate than white children, the U.S. Department announced Wednesday. This is in Oklahoma City. Article from 2016. The 45,000 student system has committed to reducing suspensions and expulsions as much as possible. So they're doing it through abeyance agreements, largely, probably some other things. But in my abeyance agreement article will be Mint that comes out in Phi Delta Kappan later this year. But basically, like suspended suspension, saying, don't do this again. If you follow rules for 90 days, we'll forget that you did it the first time. There'll be no record of it. So, and the district is providing resources. Let's do this. Such as social workers and psychologists to help students who act out. Act out is really kind of subjective, but I guess a violation of code of conduct is what I'd say. Okay, social worker and psychologist. Those are two areas which have a severe shortage across the U.S. School psychologists and school social workers. So again, I mean, you're going to have to pay these people bonuses and retention bonuses year after year to stay in their positions. It's credentialed. So to be a school psychologist, you have a state license. A lot of these people have private licenses. So again, this credential, so this barrier to entry you have to pay, usually for social worker too. So where do these people come from? And again, if you talk to social workers and psychologists, they're going to say, well, right, you can add more of us, but we have a teacher who has 40 students because we don't have enough teachers. So these plans don't include more teachers, which is kind of weird, right? Like if you really think about it, like why are there not plans targeted to more teachers? That are class sizes. There was for a while, but that just went out the window. So this is just really strange stuff. Now, some of these districts got fined. Oh, the settlement agreement right here. The settlement agreement between the school and the federal government also requires schools to ask students for their input on what is working well. Oh my God. Well, actually, that's a good thing qualitatively, but when what is not, well, how do they really know how to measure that? I could do this. Like I could accomplish this. I'm that good of a researcher. I know how to do this when it comes to discipline. But there was a settlement. Yeah. I don't know if this will link out. Oh, here it is. Yeah. So let me take us offline a second. I'm just going to download this case. I don't want to, in case I do something that gets us out here, but let's go back. Okay, so Oklahoma City, so they had a settlement with Office of Civil Rights, which is federal government. Federal government is OCR for schools. If OCR comes into your school as an administrator, this is a horrible thing. It's one of the worst experiences you'll ever go through in your life in school discipline, right? In school discipline stuff. Because OCR comes in, they're not from your neighborhood, right? They're from somewhere in the state or from somewhere in your region. So it might be three states make up this division of OCR. So they're not coming in from where you live. They're coming in and they're saying, they're going to punish you is what OCR does. And I've so many of my friends who've been through OCR complaints. Thankfully, I never dealt with one of these, but they're like, it just wipes out a year of your life. They'll come in and they'll say, we don't only want this student's file, we want 10 other students' files. And we want all students who have been disciplined in the last year. We want every file. We're going to go through everyone. We're going to interview every teacher. We're going to, and it is just crazy. And then the plans they make you put in place to fix things. If you have an OCR complaint, so as a joke, right? As a joke, I sent to a number of my friends when I was an administrator, who are also administrators. I sent them envelopes from a fake law firm, and then I had it all typed up and stuff, and I had a sticker that would go on the front, and it would say "Time sensitive, read immediately, litigation materials included." And then when they got this, immediately they thought it was like from the Office of Civil Rights. I didn't put like Office of Civil Rights up a couple of corners, and I'm not going to go that far, but they would, and actually then inside, it'd just be some kind of spoof thing, but one of my friends said, I was in a meeting and I got called out by my secretary, and she was almost in tears, and she's like, look at, like, you got to open this immediately. But it is one of those things where OCR isn't there to help you really. I mean, honestly, if you ask the administrator, and if you, as a, as a, when the states were more hands-on in auditing schools, and now it's all self-assessment, right? They give you stuff. Oh, it's like self-assessment. Well, good luck on that. Um, there's some, there's just a lot of. So this is stuff you got to deal with, right, in schools, right? So as an administrator, like if you're in a district and you had to roll out some big OCR plan, like I'd look somewhere else. I'd be gone. Like I wouldn't and have OCR come back, every 60 days to look at this and stuff like that. I mean, who wants those headaches when you've got other positions open and available to you? But OCR. So again, that's another thing where if you can move yourself into a position where you're not going to have these outside forces that will manipulate your career and be able to move you around, where again, Chad Elkins of saying, hey, I'm going to, Chad is going to offer some classes people can take to give them awareness, a knowledge base of what bookkeeping, different aspects of accounting, so forth, working up. And then, so like, here's how to do this, here's what would require a degree, or here's what's whatever. And then also, people are going to look at that and say, I'm not going to have to go through an OCR complaint if I'm doing this right. Whatever. Although it's nuanced, I have my own opinion. Bacon is saying, correct. From what I remember, teachers got paid for every student in their seat every day. Main reason why truancy is so cracked down. Yeah, I don't know if that happened so much in Wisconsin. I mean, teacher pay was set. So if your students didn't show up, it didn't impact the paycheck you took home. But as a district, right, it would impact the reimbursement your district would be getting. Truancy would impact that, and then if the district was losing count of, that student wasn't receiving an education, so the district's not, they don't get their $15,000, that does impact you, either directly or indirectly, as the district has to make up. They're getting less revenue. So, Andrew, was a great prank, man. I did it so well that, I spent so much time. And I think what I did is I had a picture. It was three other administrators. We were really good friends. We were out golfing, like on a weekend in summer, and we had a picture taken of the four of us. I still have the picture somewhere, I had the picture then printed as an 8x10. So I had this like cover letter in there that looked like it was from a law firm or whatever, and then it quickly, like after the first paragraph. And then I think I don't know how I did it. Like I had the picture within another envelope inside, which was like to be. I mean, it was crazy. Like, but of course, and some of that had to be the levity of these positions, because when you go through this, it really took a lot out of you. There's another thing called a due process complaint for special education as special education director. Those were long and could be kind of demoralizing and consuming, and they were nowhere near how intrusive an OCR investigation was. And like I had one friend, he just retired. he told me, and he talked about this for years afterwards. Like he was maybe 59, 60 years old, right, and intended to work a few more years, and some Office of Civil Rights complaint. I don't know the whole details of it, but he just said it was such a horrible experience. It went on like a whole year, and then there was this corrective action plan they'd have to implement every 60 days. OCR would be like on site or something. So I just retired. But yeah, he talked about that. But I don't know if he's still alive, but yeah, it's probably like in his obituary. He'll be like, and from the 2007 to 2009, he participated in the OCR investigation. Whatever. His district was the recipient of an OCR investigation, and that's where I think this whole thing too is this mirage, right? I don't know if it's a mirage. It's I really press my aspiring administrators who are like first year superintendents or first year principals. So I've got that's everybody in my group. So one of the first in the first class, we look at all the organizations that they are part of or their district has a membership of. So, school board association, right? And the whatever you can HR, group for your state membership and national. So suddenly first of all, you find out that these districts are part of like, 15, 20 organizations that they're paying dues of like $4,000 to $5,000 a year to have access. And then there's usually some thing like, we'll give you 2 hours of free legal counsel if you need it. But, I look at this and I really saw how these organizations function and really how they just kind of bullied during the pandemic and didn't help these districts out at all. When these districts are getting sued by parents, and I'm the one as a professor, right, coming up and saying, well, here's what it means, this lawsuit. It's injunctive relief, and the administrator is saying, I'm not getting any help from my state organizations. They're not giving out any guidance on this. Like we just all of our computers are frozen in the district. And I'm like, there's a process. I'm walking them through. I'm talking to attorneys or informing me of what's happening. And but these organizations, when the times get tough, they kind of vanish for districts, right? And and there's crazy things that happens also with school leaders or whatever. But these organizations just vanish. Like when with OCRs on your back, the state should be helping you out. Or there's just I wrote about this in School of Heirs. If you haven't bought this book, go right now. The audiobook is out there. It's the pinned thread up above. It's $7.99 on Downpour. You can download it. It's on sale until August 31st. $7.99, 6 hours of doc narrating, professional narrating. Come on. But I would everybody writes like, here's the organizations, here's how much they help me. I would stop and say, well, but have they really helped you? Like maybe in these ways they have, but in this way they didn't, right? They didn't come out and tell you how to handle compensatory education. Like they didn't give some models. They didn't give some templates of that. They didn't give you like some legal positions on how to inform yourself of your board of making a decision on mask, like how to document that you've considered National Institute of Health, the CDC, your local hospitals and stuff like that. These are all things that I wrote in this kind of position paper of like how to defend yourself, right? And I was getting informed by attorneys who were putting this together, but this organizations. And why don't they do that? Because, we don't want to give you a template. We don't want to be blamed as something. And, so I look at this, and then the other thing is I'm like, how often do you pick from a menu, or do you say, I need this service that doesn't exist? So, that's where mental health kind of changed in schools, where these professional organizations weren't giving much for mental health conferences and whatever, and districts were saying, well, we need this because like we're getting more kids diagnosed with anxiety or whatever. So like, what do we do with the doctor's order versus? And as I've said, if you look at conferences in education, right? If you look at teacher conferences, it's so much of it is stuff that people don't. It's not high priority, right? So, I can come in and look at conferences and say like, all of this stuff. Yeah, I can understand like people would want to attend this, but like your reading levels, like how do you get a baseline reading level for every student? Like what's a model to do that? Like how would you actually do that? And then document it, right? Like, so I want to see that. Like I want to see how you would qualitatively interview students and include that in a 5-year report for your district. Like I actually want to see that. Like I want to know about resources that are out there that I don't have to pay for, like now schoolsafety.gov, rems.ed.gov, because the vendors are trying to sell you stuff. And I just, one of the things I tell my new soups is I said, take some time with your administrative team and put together a list of 10 questions for your school district attorney, and questions that you're not sure of, and these things don't happen enough, so they're just automatic. But like, what if a non-custodial parent comes to pick up a kid? What's the process for that? What if a teacher is getting statements made about them online by a parent um, not threatening stuff, but about like they're not competent to do their job, and maybe they're taking a photocopy of an assignment and posting some critique, criticizing them. And how would you handle that, right? Legally, is there something you can do in that, or legally, is it free speech? I mean, so we do this in the classes. We come up with these questions, and I said, if you do this, then you have your teachers, because you don't bring in an attorney for $500-800 an hour, right, in your district attorney to sit there and just field questions off the cuff. You generate these, and then that attorney presents and says, here's 10 things, and I know these are from your district, or from some of you, and that's it. There's no questions, just move on. But well, or never retire, just don't do it for the money. Yeah. And that's interesting, because I mean, some people do it for money, and sometimes you have to do it for money. I mean, sometimes you got the credentials and the pathway to do it for the money, and kind of the system is kind of left that you knew. I don't know. Bolo saying, I call asking for a McHot dog. It's not on the menu. Yeah. So I do this and teachers, new administrators are really unsure of how to handle this, because they've never critically looked at these organizations before. They've always held them in this ivory tower palace, these things. And that's where I went with School of Errors and said, the professional standards for educator learning are all garbage, and here's why. And I'm like, whoa, but not saying these organizations are all bad, but saying they could do more for you. So how could they help you right now? And especially during COVID, like, we were coming up with a ton of ways, like how they could help you, how they could give guidance. And one of the things was like a clearinghouse, right? A toolbox, basically, where a couple of these organizations could have taken some policy stuff that districts were putting out and saying, here are districts who have put together policy for attendance, or for how we're, making decisions on whether school will be in person or not, and then share it out with other districts. They could have been a clearinghouse for that and said, we want to give some models. And then the argument against that always is, well, then if we do it, we're responsible, or we're endorsing it, or if we do it this way, then everybody will do it that way. REMS TA, by the way, which is the readiness and emergency, which I talked about in the previous show. I want to bring this up because this is the part that, so here's the break glass response to someone in a very high paid position in a state organization that's very detached from actually working in schools, but is one of these organizations, right? Or it could be national organization. And they get pressed, and it's like, why aren't you doing more? And could you, why can't we get some sample policies from you? Can you collect some policies from districts and kind of give examples, or at least like, here's a small district, here's a medium, like some, at least that we can pick from. And they wouldn't do it. They didn't do it. But let's look over here, right? Let's do this. Let's share. It's possible. So this is REMS TA existence right now, Readiness Emergency Management for Schools. They have the toolbox, right? They have this. So submit your tools. So this is federal. This is really well done. This is the one that schoolsafety.gov seems to be replacing, which I think is ludicrous, but it's garbage. You could have imagine if it's a state, your state, and they're saying, hey, now it's 2 years ago, let's say, whatever. They're saying, submit your tools here for how you document time you're spending on the phone or whatever, in Zoom with kids with disabilities, so you know how much services are being provided per their IP and how much is not, right? How about your tool for how you're communicating at board meetings or whatever? COVID-19 tabletop exercise right here. So all of this stuff. So this is the counter. I just bring back and say, well, REMS can do it, and they do it. And you could do this, right? You could do this as a state organization, or if it's like a human resources organization, or if it's a finance organization. And then they'll say, well, it's more individual to our districts. We respond one-on-one. Well, you don't. And I know that you don't because they tell me. or like they would specifically submit questions and they wouldn't get answers, or look at a conference and say every conference right now should be everything in the conference is how to function during the pandemic. It's not the warm fuzzies. It's down to brass tacks. So again, like this whole thing here, this is really, really good. And the state organizations, this was one thing they could have pivoted to, which they didn't. So, but it is really amazing when I have people scrutinize organizations that they've never questioned before, and I just say, is it really worth paying $4,000 to $6,000 for this? But on the other hand, people be like, well, I'm not paying it. It's taxpayer dollars. It's paid out of our district fund. It's not coming out of their pockets. So this is the thing where, like I said, as we start the show, $50,000 bonuses for teachers. Who's paying that? It's ultimately either coming from leftover pandemic money, or it's coming out of their fund balance, or it's an exception where they're putting it on their tax rate, their mill rate. But it's not that principal. It's not that school board. And by the time the implications of it, the angriness, it's 2 years from now, most of the people will be gone anyway. Or, there's a high level of immunity too in these positions, legal immunity. So it's not like you're going to get some challenge of a fiscal incompetence or not being a steward of the district's funds. So again, why, there can be people who say, I know this can't happen forever. It's kind of like printing money. Like you're going to have inflation just as you're having a teacher competing bonuses. People be like, it's not me. It's, I'm not paying the dime, and I'm going to be out of here when this happens. And if Dave, this is what it takes to get me from now until last day of school, June 3rd, then that's what it takes. Kind of that Moneyball approach. But again, Moneyball is a little different though, because money is about fiscal responsibility and not having kind of unlimited dollars to flow into things to kind of try to make it go away. Bolo is saying specialists and experts can often find themselves with no one to ask for help. Then ego hits. That's a really good point. It's really good. Specialists and experts can often find themselves. That's really good. I'm glad you put that out here. Yeah. So there's something called, it's really good. Yeah. If you're an educator, your principal, it kind of gets you down to a smaller group of people you're with. If you're a school administrator, it grows even smaller. But, as I talked about with that OCR complaints and sending those fake envelopes to my cohorts, right? My colleagues, like, we were a closed group. We all kind of went through very similar stuff. So you have that, but right? The more like specialized experts, you do get put on an island. There's this is really worth reading. So let me pull it over here. It's this is from, if you just type in the Vagabonds, VAGA bonds, well, plus Henry Ford. But hey, it's Riggs Jr. Hey, Riggs. The Vagabonds. So this, as Bolo said, specialists and experts can often find themselves with no one to ask for help. Between 1915 and 1924, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Harvey Firestone, and John Burroughs used to do summer trips. So they would go out in the Florida Everglades and expeditions and stuff. But here they are, like they're out here and they're camping, and like they would throw your camp chair into the fire, like if you went to the bathroom behind a tree or something. They were doing all this kind of crazy stuff. But so these are all like super powerful people, right? Like Henry Ford, Edison. These are super powerful. So like who can they relate to? And that was one of the things when they did the 4 Vagabonds for 9 years is they would get together and they would just outside of work, and they would take these trips and they would, just kind of camping things, right? And that was because they could relate to each other, but they had to seek each other out and had to commit to this. And I don't know, could you do it today or what it would look like or anything, but you kind of can do it. I mean, Masculine Geek, if you take, Vince and Rob and TJ and the commitment that they've made to, once or twice a year to get together in person and to do things, like go to historical sites or, do gaming or, things like that. But there needs to be a real conscious effort. And this type of stuff is gone today. People don't do this anymore. But take some time, read about the four vagabonds, because this was really a cool thing. Riggs is saying not much. Trying to relax. Oh no, after a crappy day. Sorry about that, buddy. So hoping you'd have a good day there. So yeah, that four vagabonds again. Schools, and so I spent some time in the classes talking about that too. Of saying, who are your? It's not just like one a superintendent who I respect very much, and this was one thing he told people after like a stressful day. It's like really kind of stressful day. Go home and like listen to a radio station you don't typically listen to on the radio. And that's pretty surface level in that. But I mean, at least it was kind of something. But yeah, you gotta have people, and not even necessarily in your profession, but people you're able to hang around with and have like velocity of information. There's not a lot of people I could really have a good talk with about that. There are people, and I appreciate that very, very much when they show an interest in my work, and we talk about it. I really appreciate that. But there just frankly aren't a lot of people that's kind of their thing, and the way that book is put together. So for me to continue to talk about velocity of information and what that looks like and how it projects, and how people should be considering that, or if you have families that you can watch for voltage. Yeah, I got to stay energized by keeping kind of my network of people, some of the people interviewing the book and touching base with them. So Bacon is saying, speaking of Masculine Geek, I am never letting Jack Napier live down, buying everyone around with White Claws and a damn bar during this visit here. Jack coming over to the United States, that guy. So yes, teacher shortages not going away. If you do these big bonuses, it's not going to impact retention. Remember that a very well-structured study, and I analyzed this, when you are marketing a job or living experience, a neighborhood, town to people right to live. If people will make the choice of saying, I want to be in an environment where if I lose my wallet, someone's going to return it to me, right? With everything in it. I want that, and I will take that over a chance to make more money. The study was double. So, so what does that mean for the school stuff? I mean, because you could say, yeah, teachers we need to bring up the pay and stuff like that. And there's this other side of how do you, as HR, how do you market the part of this, which is the returning your wallet, right? If you lose that aspect. I don't know. I have to think about that. Maybe I'll throw that out there. What does this look like? There's only so much you can do when you bring somebody in and saying, here's these pluses of our community, right? Why you should live here. Because ultimately, someone can be remote. Other strategies, so things that are being done now, some schools are doing a 4-day work week. They're making it easier for people who don't have a teaching license to enter the profession. And going with international teachers, paying relocation expenses. I think teachers should negotiate their salary. you're in a much stronger position if you're in a high need area. You can find that out searching that in your state. But, if I work in chemistry or tech ed, or if I work in speech therapy, physical therapy, it's a high need. I can probably negotiate parts of my compensation package. And retirement packages, schools are trying to make that a selling point. It's not going to work. People want the money now. They have no idea what's going to be down, what the world will be like in 30 years. Like, think how much the world has changed in 3 years. So you got to take your foot off of the gas and retirement stuff, because it just doesn't mean squat to people. Schools are a Moneyball approach, and it's really like you should take your HR director and your school board and superintendent and business manager, and you should all watch Moneyball, and then just leave and say, all right, this is our game plan. Because it really is. It is. And, again, look at the A's. The A's didn't implode because of that approach. I mean, it worked for a while until other people got onto it and kind of leveled out across the league. But you are preparing for one school year. The legacy thing, the institutional knowledge is, you've got to figure out how you're going to document, how you're going to pass it on. But it is not the slow baton pass where, someone's coming in now. Josie's coming in because her mom is retiring, who was here for 32 years. Now Josie's going to take your classroom. You don't have this stuff anymore. You're coming over here out of the military and you haven't been a teacher before. So, okay, let's do this. There's just a lot of things that you got to kind of understand if you're a teacher. What's an IEP? Seclusion restraint. Like, if you see two kids fighting, and even if they're really going at it, if you physically separate those students without having a trained team to restrain them, you can be in big trouble for that. So, I have, interesting, make teachers take IQ tests. I'm not a big fan of IQ. I've taken a number. I'd take some of the programs I got into. I think they got rid of them. It's interesting because somebody took velocity of information and did what they call the reverse IQ test on it by taking and reading. There'd have to be some way that you take the reading level and the terms, but anyway, I'm sure it's like a pseudoscience. One person, but they tried to generate what they thought the IQ of the author was. So, I think you can probably do that maybe with a fairly accurate range, because you'd have a pretty good sampling, like 60,000 words of someone. So, yeah, I don't know. Purchase The Velocity of Information. Get it paperback. Great book. Also, figures in here that were custom designed by Amy Kate DiStefano. Credit to her. But we put stuff together. It's amazing, this book. And it's up for the S.I. Hayakawa Book Prize. So I'll know in a month if I receive it or not. That'd be pretty darn cool. School of Errors is the most honest book ever written about the $3 billion school safety industry. $3 billion, it's really, if you take in mental health and the money that's going out for fortifications and stuff, it's probably $5-6 billion. It's really doubled since the book has been written, which is probably equal to inflation, right? This is in paperback now, $20. You can find this book. So this was released in summer in paperback. Otherwise, it's hard copy is like $30. If you really want to commit. But otherwise, this book, and it's out there in ebook for less, and it's also out there, audiobook. So, and it's on Audible. It's also on the link I posted. There's many places, like it's rolling out to 44 distributors, plus libraries are having it in audiobook. I narrated it, so at a studio, but you get to hear the passion of the doc. So $7.99 help out doc. And then so anyway, in Audible, it's kind of weird because they price things different. A couple places do that. So like I put the book at $7.99 until the 31st of August. So it was accessible for parents. I marked it down for libraries too. And so some places like Downport, $7.99, and Audible, it's more. It's like twice that. But then I don't know if Audible expects that people will use their Audible credit toward it, or I knew that going in that the pricing was going to be different. Like I would set a price and half of the distributors would follow that and half would change it. I do get proportionally, if it sells for more on a certain site, I do get that. But Bolo is saying, is it in the water? So, oh, yeah, thank you. And stuff. Pretty crazy. You know, when I wrote about it in School of Errors is just a really good book. Take away the school safety stuff, it's just a really good book. Thinking during chaotic times and how like something that happened to you 15 years ago or happened to the nation 15 years ago, like Rocky versus Drago, Rocky IV, Harbor Rescue. But there's just a lot of good stuff in that book. And social contract, right? The Leviathan, thinking about how what we expect from the government, right? So the government doing these trade-offs with us for the last 20 years. Saying, oh, we got to be able to read your email to keep everybody safe. You got to wear you got to take your shoes off to get on an airplane to stay safe. Where do these trade-offs, well, end? Like, what do you keep giving? What do you keep handing over? And the book really lays that out. Like, that was, well before the pandemic. Yeah, there's this app now, partial app on her phone of, 15 feet around or 8 feet around somebody, close to someone who's tested positive for 15 minutes, I get notified. All of that weird stuff. Bacon saying, you ever consider narrating other people's books? I've been asked this a couple times. Thanks for asking. I don't. Narrating was a terrifying experience for me. It was one of the hardest things I've done in my life, was to narrate School of Errors. And actually my voice it seems to be holding up pretty well tonight, but a lot of people I know who are narrators can narrate 5-6 hours a day, right? My voice can't hold out for that. So it's noticeable in School of Errors. Well, I was recorded over, I think, like 8 sessions, and it's different. Like the humidity would change my voice. School of Errors is definitely noticeable. My Philosophy of Information was professionally narrated by Ben Hawk, and that's amazing, right? The guy's an actor, but School of Errors, the only way it could ever be an audiobook was I had to narrate it. It's part of the deal. It's why it got done, because I wanted to have an accessible book for people who were visually impaired. I worked at the School for the Blind. To not have School of Errors accessible to blind people, I had to write them. But are you saying I have a good voice? Like I'd be a good narrator? Because people have told me I have a good voice, like for radio, and a couple of people who have edited, some things that I've had in my interview, stuff, whatever. Say, oh, you have a good voice. Like someone told me not too long ago, like an Art Bell, like back in the 90s or whatever, if you had like a show or something where you had guests on, which I think is kind of big now, but I said, you have a good voice. Matthew Hoover from CRS Firearms, the first time we talked, it was on the phone before any of the time I was on his show and he was on my show, but we talked about it. And after we got a little bit in, he goes, you got a really good voice. Like we should talk. Like you should be doing more on YouTube. You got like a really good YouTube voice. And he's the guy who would know, because he was making his living at the time doing that. And he was studying all the details of here's what you have to do with the thumbnail and keywords and when to release stuff. But he's like, whoa. And so, yeah, I wouldn't do it for other people, because I don't think I'd meet their standard, and I don't have the Well, one, I'd have to do the technical. I'd have to. I don't have the technical stuff to do it here, so I'd have to upgrade that. And I don't want the pressure, right? I don't want someone to do that, to hire me, and then I feel I have to get this stuff done and I have to go through it. So, yeah. But I have been asked a few times if I would consider that, and I was like, when I narrated School of Airs, I actually love public speaking, right? I've been on PBS twice. But when narrating a book, it was really strange because I told the audio engineer, so it's just him and I in the studio. That's it. I'm in a little booth. He's listening in another area and talking to me over headphones. I'm kind of just reading. And I said, I'm just like, I don't know, terrified of this, which was really strange. And you have to do so much prep work too. Like you have to figure out when you're going to take a breath, because if you're reading 10,000, 15,000 words, and so you have to, so I have all of these documents, like School of Airs I went through, and I have a PDF and I went through and I marked where to take a breath. And I marked words that I was real sure on how to pronounce it. I listened to other people pronounce them just so I had the right accent and things like that too. Moneyball, stuff like that. And then I also had so I had that, and I had a print copy, and then I would go and listen at night to the files. I mean, there was a lot to it, but I would lose I would add in a word that wasn't supposed to be there, right? Or I would do a little commentary, but it wasn't in the narrative, and so I'd have to re-record that, or I would just so there were a lot of things, like you'd have to do retakes. So that when you listen to School of Airs, I mean, Philosophy of Information is perfectly polished because Ben was also the engineer on that. But you can tell, like, where I had to come in and redo parts of that because there was a mistake in it, or it didn't have the same energy. So, but yeah, I think I would be a really fun sidekick or co-host on a regular show. Like an Adam Carolla, or something like that. Like, I would be really good. But I think that would be a cool thing, because there are a lot of funny things. Like I thought about sending the fake complaint stuff out to friends. There's just a lot of just funny stuff in general, like you can bring in. You don't have to get so serious. But I really think I would thrive in a two-person show. I don't know what that would be. So, if anything, I mean, in School of Airs, though, narrating that and having that accomplished out there, it's just a big personal accolade, right? I mean, it's one of those things people will never have an idea of how complex that process was, and how much time it took. Reading, it's 6 hours. The book is 6 hours completely edited down. So that's a lot that went into that. So let's see, you're going through the chat to wrap things up. So let's go over here. Oh, if you haven't already, man, I got a pair of shoes I've been watching on eBay. Oh, I'd love to do a show sometime. It's Corey Slater joining us here at 3 hours and 25 minutes. Corey, I would like to do a show where you go on to Craigslist, because I did this last week just on my own, and you go for free stuff. If you just go free, it doesn't work very well, because people put the word like free shipping or whatever, free delivery, but then the item's not free. So you got to go free stuff, and you usually find it's just stuff that's free. And the most crazy stuff you'll find. Like there was one lady who posted, she had a picture of like 3/4 bottle full of like Lysol, and then like some pine sol, like a half-used thing of whatever, and she's like, mostly full cleaners, just need to get rid of. Like, it's kind of a weird thing to put out there for free that someone would contact you for a 3/8 full bottle of fantastic. Uh, you know, I'm like, I don't know how that works. I need to contact Bold on Bold because he's asked me a few times as a joke to come on his show, which I will. But I need to say, yeah, set the date, make it happen. So yeah, and just going through the goofy things, like somebody had a couple lawn chairs, and they were like all the stuff was ripped out, like chairs from the 80s, where that fabric that would go across the strips, and it said like, you can refinish these chairs, reupholster. All right. Well, hang on just a second. I gotta check something. Don't go anywhere. Be right back.
As chaos erupts, torrents of conflicting yet urgent messages gush from media outlets. What is the magnitude of the incident, and what should people do to protect themselves? Dr. David P. Perodin teaches you how to prevent mental burnout by observing indicators and building a robust member check network. Reporter James David Dixon of the Detroit News proclaims, the velocity of information will empower its readers. Drawing on current events, history, interviews, and scholarship, the velocity of information is an education in the way people react and adapt to change in this fast-spinning world. Never has it been more important to sift facts and stories for truth and meaning. There are teachable moments on every page. Buy The Velocity of Information, Human Thinking During Chaotic Times. Available from your favorite bookstore or online retailer.
It's true. The book is available from your favorite bookstore. So here's over on Amazon, right? So here's School of Errors and 54. If you haven't reviewed it, you've read it, please review it. So this is available in, so amazing to see. So, yeah, Kindle, $15, the audiobook. If you don't have a subscription, they charge $17.46, which is posted over here for $7.99 on Downpour. And so this image had to be different than the cover of the book because I didn't own the image to the School of Errors right there. I don't own that. That's the publisher that bought the rights, designed that and bought this image. So I had to have a new image designed, and you can't copyright a title. You can title a book the same as somebody else. You can't copyright a title. So, and they were fine with this. Right? You have to use a different image. And I had this made for me and had the rights to use this image. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And then once we get over to the sample, Velocity of Information is about 17 reviews for too long. So that people need to review. I know people have read it and people have the audiobook. Please. And it's really important now because this book is being considered for a major award to have people who read it and this book has been meaningful to them to take some time to share that. Because really it's this time when people are looking, in addition to reading the book, they're looking at the reviews. So if you haven't, you've done that, please take the time and to get that out there, especially with School of Errors being back to school book, School of Errors. People look then of what else has the author written? And lots of information. So this is the time my books kind of sell like the most, right? Because it's back to school and lots of information. Get some momentum from it. But right now, lots of information is this window where it is being considered. So, like, if you read it, and you're gonna write a review or you listen to it. The review is likely more powerful now than it would be, say, October 1st. I appreciate any time that you wrote it. Let's go over to chat here. So, Vanessa's saying I buy 2 audiobooks in 2 weeks. Awesome. That's awesome. So Vanessa, my local library, I offered to buy School of Airs. Right, lots of information. Yeah. But, and it was weird because they're like, well, can you just donate a copy to us? I'm like, well, no, like on a thumb drive or whatever. I'm like, I can't. It's not the way that audiobooks work. I mean, you have a system, right? You buy audiobooks. Let me know what that is through your Overdrive or whatever. I'll write you a check as a donation to the library. It never happened. They really were just like, why can't you just do this? Because that's not the way that donations work to libraries. So, Bacon, Kitty, Andrew, Corey. Corey is someone who Vanessa, I should buy a bunch and bring them to certain school boards and cell phone numbers. Oh, that's pretty crazy. I have that Vanessa on the first day of the superintendent class I'm teaching this fall. First day, I have articles where we discuss exactly what you're saying: cell phone lockers and banning cell phones. The state of Michigan moving to try to ban cell phones in schools. And break it down. First of all, is this where you want to put your time when you have school shortages? This is innate technology everyone's always going to have with them. But I think what's happening is the TikTok challenges got out of control. So film yourself stealing the paper dispenser from your school bathroom. And so that's one of the things. I think the other thing is people are starting to become aware of the deep fakes, right? You can videotape or get a video clip on your phone of a teacher or another student or whatever, and modify it so they look like they're saying something or they're vaping or whatever. It's kicked out of school. And so these weaponized deep fakes are really a big part. So busy streaming tonight, good thing. Someone was talking to me. Yeah, I basically kind of become I basically have become kind of a chat room moderator. It's my professional job. Is this better? Like the mic was down there. I need to get out of this. The only thing I need to read close to that was maybe Carlos Castanillo or maybe some more. Good deal. A big angry Philistine. Yeah, Thursday night usually, when I was doing these shows on a more regular basis, I did Monday nights because there really wasn't a lot of conflict. Thursday night, Moneyball, mid-August. There's just more going on. Mondays seem to be working pretty well. I just moved this to. I just did this one. I guess I need to sit down and commit to a more regular, Monday schedule. I think like Bacon he staked Friday nights. He stuck with that. I mean, so Friday night, 10 o'clock my time, you'll get Central Time. Bacon's going to be there. So. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much. I'm going to take us out with a few ads here, but I appreciate it. And I appreciate if you read my books too, post reviews. Appreciate any watch hours. This is episode 183, so all shows are out there in video. There's a lot of cool interviews too. Hey, Larry Lawton, America's Biggest Jewel Thief, is on my show. Go back and find that. And Larry has 1.41 million YouTube followers. And find out how how did you really get information in jail that you could trust, right? Like who's your go-to? Especially if you're being shuffled around or being put in a hole for a month, and it's all there. So Well, so yeah, nice to see everybody. Hey, Corey, Bacon, Andrew, Vanessa, Bolos. Appreciate it, Solitude. And until next time, all right, take care and appreciate. I guess I gotta get better mics. I gotta bust them out. Let me take us out here. All right, let me take us out and see everybody. Describe the odor. Is it like when something electrical is burning? And so on. Ridiculous, right? We don't shift the investigation to the reporter, but that's covertly what the school district thought needed to happen to prevent their investigation scrambling principals from burning out. And as this paragraph smolders, it would be prudent to consider bringing students with disabilities from the sidelines of safety and center them to active roles of detecting and reporting threats. So we had a rather difficult meeting. Upon due diligence of examining the reporting system, I informed the district representative that I could not justify modifications to the existing model, as such changes would make the system less accessible to students. Well, that was a short chit-chat. The district folks believed, or hoped, that the threat input system could be modified and maintained with fidelity. I wasn't in alignment with that hypothesis, and so I was thanked and given notice that our partnership would be over at month's end. Business is business, but in school safety, it's never as simple as that.